call us to order. Say what time it is, it's right for the next.
So that we're just calling everything to order for the meeting September 19th, 2023 for the Sustainability Commission. The time is 5:32. So we want to get started. So the first part is accepting the agenda. Oh, roll call first.
And I can do that Paige. Dawn.
Here.
Roy.
Here.
Kathy. Yes, here. Matt.
Here.
Andrew.
Yep.
Michael.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Ian.
Here.
Bernard.
Here.
And Ian. All commissioners.
Okay. So moving on from everybody being present then to look at accepting the agenda that we've got in front of us. Anyone with any questions or suggestions? All right, looks good. So moving on then, welcome and introductions. So welcome to the meeting. Oh, so welcome to the meeting. We've got some public comments coming up. So at the start of the meeting, my name is Andrew Forster. I'm the chair for the commission. We got voted in last meeting, so those of you that weren't there for that one. Public comments coming up. So this is time for members of the public to address the commission on agenda items and items of general interest. With that, do we have anyone here for public comments? Gentleman at the back.
Yes.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Stacy Hognettle, 47-year resident of Palm Springs. My family's been here 87 years. I was the first licensed marijuana cultivation facility here in your town, so I've kind of helped work through some of the ordinances and kind of clarify some of the things that could help here. I see you guys were looking at an ordinance for sustainability for cannabis facilities where you're looking at regulating the light or the volume or the amount of light that we'd be able to use in the facility. And then also you're looking at using solar, requiring us to use solar in the facilities as well. First one was the lighting of the facilities. It's kind of you guys regulating us to an animal level is kind of telling us that you guys know what's best, how to grow a plant. It might be better to have more animals and less animals. We don't really know yet. But in order to be efficient with building this the way you wire it. So you can have the same equipment that produces 2.8 nanomoles of light. But if you wire it differently, it draws different amp drops. So you could have that same requirement and people are wiring their buildings incorrectly and they're using the max amount of amp drop, where if you use different volts that you have for your power, because there's 110, 220, 480. So if you use as much 480 volts as you can, it actually drops the amp drop by half. So if you're looking to lower the usage of power in a lot of these facilities, it comes down to the other wire. So if we are wiring our equipment correctly, we're going to be way more efficient on the power we're consuming. I mean, that's just all I can really have to say on as far as the power consumption side for the lighting itself. There's a lot of different lighting, LED lighting companies out there. We're stepping away from the dual-ended high pressure sodium style because they're really good at growing the plants, but what they do is produce a lot of heat, which then requires a lot of air conditioning to cool the light. So stepping away from that, we're now going to LED lights, which are a little untested, and we're still having some growing pains with them as well, and they're very expensive. So, you know, we're trying to kind of promote people coming to our town and filling some of these buildings up and cultivating here and paying taxes for their money. We don't want to make it any more difficult for sure. And requiring them to use a certain style of light and certain animal is kind of, I think, overstepping a little bit, you know, because we were kind of the first in the town to regulate indoor cultivation. But, you know, I think that we'd be better off looking at the efficiency of the buildings themselves and how the actual building is consuming the power. So I've gone to a lot of people where we've had a layout design for a building for all the lights you could fit in it, but you don't have enough power there for a certain style equipment. Well, if you get the right style equipment that's at the best, most efficient voltage, it's, you know, more than half of the amp draw that it would be at the other 120, which would be your regular voltage in your outlets, your walls and stuff like that. It's only provided commercially. You don't have three-phase power in your homes, so you can't wire up things to 480 volts. You could do 220, but you know, that's what most of your air conditioners run on because that's the most efficient power that you are provided. So at a cannabis facility, our most efficient power would be the 480 volt that comes to us. And most of the equipment, you know, manufacturers provide a 480 volt fixture or air conditioning unit or fan or transfer pump for water. So if someone was more efficient in choosing their equipment, wiring, building correctly, you can go from trying to, I think you guys were looking like 20% reduction, you could do something like 50%. You know, and then we're not looking at like regulating people on the lights that they're gonna use, and that kind of makes it a little bit difficult when you go into design phase, so. Excuse me. Please. The thing is also with solar, I'm from this town, you know, we don't want to waste water, we don't want to waste the power we have. But it's kind of difficult with solar just because they don't produce enough power for what we're trying to use. So, I mean, there's a certain percentage that maybe we could allow, because that would take care of like, all of our, ancillary lighting, you know, like all the common space lighting, stuff like that. Like if we could use that energy for that, then that would be okay. But there's no way that there's no solar. We'd have to, for a 6,000 square foot building, I would have to buy 6 more acres and put out a solar field in order to produce enough power to just supply my building. And on top of that, we run at nighttime still because we have to dehumidify, we have to cool. We can adjust light cycles so that we're not running at night and stuff like that, but for the most part, most of the equipment is still running 24 hours a day. So we would have to have a battery backup system that would be able to provide enough for us. Right now, Tesla is the people that have something that's not really commercially available for anyone yet stuff. So I mean, I do agree with everything you're trying to do for sure. I think we could probably do a little better by just looking at like the efficiency of the way that people design the electrical flow of the buildings and the equipment that they use too. Because in every commercial application out here, you have the 480 volt power that they could use. That's the most efficient. I mean, just for example, the same LED fixture, if you wired it up to the same outlet you have on the wall here, is probably gonna draw about 8 amps. If you took and you wired it up to the next phase, which would be 220 volts, you're looking at maybe 5 amps. You went up to the next 480 amps, you're looking at like 2.3 amps on that same fixture, just on its draw. You know, so that's where I think, you know, just being smarter about the way they lay out the facility to really kind of help things. But it kind of takes someone that understands electrical, you know, and you have to have it. And my family's been here for 87 years. We've been doing general contracting. I got into the cannabis thing because I lost my large intestine from a parasite. I got Lake Havasu, it damaged it, and I was fully into the opiate situation, which was just ruining my life. And cannabis saved it. And then the city helped save my life too, because they allowed the use. And they gave me a passion, you know, gave me a drive every day to wake up and do something. So I'm here to help whatever I can to make sure that we keep doing that for people. And we want people to come to the town and grow here, because, you know, it does help the tax revenues. So, you know, that's about all I can really say about all that.
Well, thanks, Sharon. It's obviously needs something. Quick question: when you've got,
We can.
oh,
We have
sorry.
to vote on this now. We can talk about it when we get back to the.
I'll be right here.
Yeah. I'll ask you then.
Sorry.
That's fine. That goes.
We can come back to it when we'll talk about this.
And were there any other public comments? No. Okay. So then moving on, it's the chair report. I don't really have anything to report, we're just getting started. But then it would be moving on to new commissioner introductions. So if we want to start over a page, and then we'll just go all the way around.
And if everyone could turn their mics on for me, just to make sure we can get that, or when it comes to the on.
Oh.
Now, sorry, it wasn't clear. So we can pick it up better on the recording. I'll do it in a minute.
Is there anything you want me to share specifically?
Just you, okay, unless,
Yeah, hi, I'm Paige Azarash. I use they them pronouns. I live in the Geometry neighborhood.
Hello, my name is Max Dira. I live in Palm Springs, in Encina, and work in Toledo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dean Grubel and I live in Mountain Gate.
Michael Frick, I live in Sunrise Park, and I was told to join the commission after I complained about light pollution, leaf blowers, etc. over many years, and I was told by the mayor to join the commission.
Hi, my name is Eric Graham. Some people may recognize my face because I've been here, working one of the businesses that people come and go and see me in and out downtown, or excuse me, South Palm Springs. See a few people here I recognize from other stuff that I've done within the city. I'm glad to be here, finally. It took me a while to get to do this, but it's what I'm looking forward to the next couple of years. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Cohn. I live in Sunrise Park neighborhood, and I have been an officer on our NORG for 10 or 15 years, something like that. And I'm very active in 1PS, and that's how I became interested in doing something more.
I'm Don Barrett. I am the only not containing. No, I've lost it. Okay, anyway, remaining commissioner from the commission up through last year. I live in the Warm Sands neighborhood. My interest always is issues of access to environmentally useful practices, rather than being interested in any one specific one. I'm more interested in issues of access.
Hello, my name is Roy Clark. I live in the Four Seasons neighborhood. I actually beat out Don because I was on the commission for 6 years from 2016 to 2022, but I had to take a year off. But I came back because of my interest in sustainability. I would like to say I was involved in a number of things, including proposing the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers, which the council passed in 2017. Also been involved in the waste reduction subcommittee, involved in developing the battery recycling program, the foodware ordinance, and the climate action roadmap. So I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Bernard Rotner. I live in the Los Compadres neighborhood. And I'm happy to be here. I am a fan of all things sustainable. I have kind of a passion for the built environment. I worked in the building services industry for about 25 years. And I'd like to help use that knowledge to help better our city.
Hi, everyone. I'm Prema Walker. I live in Los Compadres. I'm not from this country, so I grew up having sustainable things as a part of life. So I'm happy to be here to teach and educate people and tell them what are the small things we can change to be more sustainable that can get together into the bigger picture. Thank you.
my name is Andrew Foster, as I've already introduced myself, living in Palermo, and yeah, just happy to be here and help out. So great.
Hello, my name is Christian. I'm the sustainability specialist here with City of Palm Springs. I've been here about 3-ish months. Yeah, and I'm working on kind of transportation, the community garden, and some urban heat and shade, things like that.
I think everybody knows me. If you don't, you can call me LP. Please do. Most people do. Lindsay can be C, but if I'm also good for me. Yeah, over here.
Okay, so moving on from the introductions will be staff comments. So we'll go to LP for a review of past business and then an update on turf conversion match.
Thank you. Really good to see a whole full table. This is really exciting. I'm really glad everyone is joining us today. Glad to have been able to talk to many of you in orientations over the past few days. If anybody has any other questions or more things that you've been thinking about, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. You'll notice that I always BCC all the commissioners, which sometimes leads to errors, like I think I've sent an email to the commission and I haven't, which happened when I tried to send the agenda last Thursday. It turns out I just sent it to me and Christian, but you all can all feel free to reply all to those emails, you'll get one of the two of us. So I don't have a lot of things I want to talk about today necessarily. Two items I wanted to touch on really quickly, just to kind of keep us all up to speed. So, at Dawn and Roy's suggestions, I pulled together a list here of, let me just pull this up so you can actually see it more effectively. Okay, not just hit a button that you haven't, but it's fine. Yes. So here's just a short list of some things that have kind of been open items over the past year with the commission. Not necessarily an exhaustive list, it's the list we could think of and glean from meeting minutes and agendas. A note on how to read this list, if it says no ETA currently or no update ETA, that doesn't mean there's no information, it just means we don't have it like on a calendared agenda yet. However, if this is something that the commissioners want to talk about in a future agenda, we can either now or toward the end of the meeting or whenever decide to bring a certain item to a particular agenda. So there's kind of 3 buckets here. If you remember from orientation, everything in my brain makes sense in groups of 3. So I apologize in advance for that. So there's 3 draft regulations that are kind of percolating in one or another state. We will be talking about the cannabis reach code and renewable energy target requirements today. So we'll hold that until that later in the discussion. We're also working on some reach codes for existing buildings. We'll talk a little bit more about what reach codes are later. But those, we're still waiting on some data from the state to get to a next like discussable point. So I anticipate the best time for us to look at that would be in the winter, early spring of next year. So just kind of putting in your brain, that'll come back at some point. And then the smoking ordinance, which some of us have discussed, is a draft ordinance that was requested from council and we worked on with the Human Rights Commission to restrict smoking in certain public spaces where it's still allowed. That one, we don't currently have like a timeline from council or a calendar for this commission to revisit it. However, if the commission decides that they want to take it up, we can definitely calendar that for discussion in the future. So those are the draft regulations that are kind of percolating. In terms of programs that are kind of on the newer side, and we may want to have some updates or bring some of the new people up to speed, environmentally preferable purchasing. So this is the regulation and requirement that guides how we buy things as a city government. You know, we're a pretty large consumer. We have a fairly sizable budget. We buy a lot of stuff. So last year in the spring, the council passed a policy that the commission had a lot of help in developing. I'm anticipating the next best time to talk about that will be in the spring when we have our first round of data for how the first year went. However, if we want to talk about it sooner, if we want to get up to speed on it, I'm happy to do that sooner. But that's kind of what I'm anticipating would be a good next time to talk about that. The other community energy, so that is our community choice aggregation offering, that's sort of like power utility, that allows us to purchase our 100% renewable energy for residents, businesses here in the city. That's something that I think would probably be good to add to an upcoming agenda to get everybody up to speed. So maybe that's something that we can look at for next couple months. We can do a deep dive on DCE if the commission wants to do that. But there's no particular major changes happening, just more of like an opportunity to learn more about it. And there's some new projects, I think, coming online that'll go into that power stream. So it's gonna be interesting. Church conversion, so we talked about that a lot at the July meeting. And we will give you probably monthly updates on how that's going. We actually have the water agency here today to talk about the state regulation, but we'll also touch on that in a second. If anyone wants to do a deeper dive on this at any point, maybe we can hold on that conversation pending the presentation from DWI today, but something we can definitely revisit. And then the foodware ordinance, so that's the regulation that was passed, the ordinance in about 2021, right?
Yes.
That bans the use of many single-use plastics in foodware, so styrofoam, single-use plastic utensils, straws, that kind of thing. Happy to do a deep dive on this. We don't have it on the calendar, but happy to dig into that further if we want. We can also look at that in the waste subcommittee. We'll talk about subcommittees later. And then in terms of ongoing programs, so the one that we have scheduled for today, we'll talk about the battery recycling program. We'll do a brief update on that, how it's been going. The leaf blower ordinance, we don't have it scheduled to do an update there, but we can. And then greenhouse gas accounting and climate action planning. So that's something Christian is leading on. I think probably the next best time for us to talk about that as a group will be late fall, early winter. We're bringing a consulting firm on board to help us with the next round of the emissions accounting. So we'll bring that to the commission when they're on board. We can do a preliminary discussion if you want, but I think it'll be more fruitful at that point. I'll turn to our returning commissioners or our chair to see if there's anything I left off that list. Okay, great. Anyone have any questions on this? Okay. And I'll just quickly touch on, I didn't actually make a slide for this, but I'll quickly touch on how our conversion is going. And actually feel free to correct me if I say anything wrong. So we launched the new program at the beginning of August. And so this year's program is funded by about $1 million from the city council on the city side. And DWA has about $3 million that they've allocated for this as well. So if you're doing great math, you will see that is a very natural 3-to-1 match that we're doing this year. So $3 from DWA, $1 from us. And then we're putting those together so you get $4 per square foot. Last year, we had a square footage cap where projects couldn't receive the full match past a certain square footage. This year, we don't have that cap. The goal of making the dollar change and the cap change was to get more large HOAs into the program and getting rid of those big swaths of grass. And so far, that's actually a lot of what we're seeing in terms of projects in the queue, which is really a sign. So as of the end of August, about 20% of this year's matching funding had been spoken for, which I think is pretty good clip. It's also nice that we didn't run out on the first day like we did last year. Means we can help a lot more people, I think, this year in a more kind of manageable process. Anything else to that? Great. So that's where we're at on dirt conversion. Any questions on that? Anybody trying to convert some dirt? Everybody else's story's already gone here. Great, that's all I got.
Okay, so moving on from the staff comments, thanks so much, Albie. The next part is new business with a presentation from the Desert Water Agency on new state regulations, which I believe is 2 over there.
So good evening. I'm Paul Ortega, and I'm the board president for the Desert Water Agency. Been a board director since December of 2020. And we're really happy to be here this evening. We're grateful that we have a strong working relationship with your team and with the city. And so in the spirit of that coordination, we came here tonight to inform you about something that's on the horizon. The State Water Board began its formal rulemaking process back in August 18th. And what they're doing is putting together objectives, if you will, or budgets, water budgets for water agencies throughout the state, and that includes, of course, Desert Water Agency. And the objective is the amount of water the state deems is efficient use of residential properties and other areas with a dedicated irrigation meter. And the draft regulation isn't a result of it's not a result of our inability to actually provide water. I mean, we've been in this water management business for decades. That's the whole reason the agency was started in 1961. And so we have a sustainable supply that we project out, decades in advance on where we are with that. But the draft regulations would put the water agency in the position of having to reduce water sold considerably in the next coming years, including at city sites. Given that the city of Palm Springs is our largest customer, we wanted to let you know that these more aggressive water conservation requirements may be ahead. After the regulation is enacted, Desert Water Agency will be subject to compliance orders and steep fines if we exceed those objectives. Right now, we're working to ensure that the regulations appropriately consider our local nuances, and we'll go a little bit more into that in a moment. We welcome the city to engage in the process alongside with us. Our staff has shared dates for public hearings in Sacramento and comment letter deadlines that will be coming up in the next month. I've also presented it to your city council, my city council, last week, but welcome the opportunity to dive deeper here with you this evening. Ashley Metzger, who many of you may know already, is a senior advisor to the Desert Water Agency. And so in a moment, she'll present the details of what that regulation is intended to do. On October 4th, Ashley and I will be in Sacramento at the State Water Board's hearing on this matter, along with other water agencies throughout California. And we are also coordinating with our sister water agencies throughout here in the desert in terms of those letters to the State Water Board as far as the impact that we expect. So tonight, I'll turn this over to Ashley at this point so she can take you through our presentation. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the Sustainability Commission and staff. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to you about water. I know that it's something that is very important to many of you and may be what called you to the table here. So back during the last drought, just for some background, we were all working toward what we call SBX 7-7 or the Water Conservation Act of 2009. And that was a requirement to reduce water use by 20% by the year 2020. What the State Water Board heard, not so much about the Water Conservation Act, but more so about emergency drought regulations that came into play from water providers throughout the state was one size fits all does not work. And they heard it time and time and time again. And so when California was in search of this new water conservation goal after the drought of 2014 to 2016, the state came forward and legislators proposed this way to create kind of a hand in glove concept of creating what is an appropriate budget for each individual water agency. And that was achieved through two bills, Senate Bill 606 and Assembly Bill 1668, both of which passed in 2018 and collectively are known as the Making Conservation a California Way of Life framework. So that basically set the state on this path to giving each water district the budget that President Martinez spoke of. So some local background, and for those of you that aren't intimately aware, you know, groundwater is our primary source here in the Coachella Valley. And the groundwater basin is a really great buffer from drought. You know, other suppliers rely on water coming into their community through pipelines, and if that water doesn't come, they don't have water to serve. Now, we have a very sizable groundwater basin. You can liken it to a savings account. We've got a lot of water stored there that even when there's not water coming in, we're still able to pump water out of the ground and deliver it to our customers without risking things like the ground sinking. That said, we are still very heavily invested in conservation and have been for a very long time. We have been paying folks to take their grass out since 2014. And we currently have a regional study underway to really better understand what each square foot of grass removed means for our community in terms of water savings. So we can work with the city in the future on setting a dollar amount that really makes sense. And perhaps it will allow us to be a little bit more aggressive there. Perhaps it will allow us to be more competitive for state and federal grant funding. So I just listed on the screen a few of the different incentives we have available. You know, we're always looking to help folks through programs and audits as well, but we do offer incentives for grass removal, smart irrigation controllers, ultra efficient nozzles, low flow toilets, washing machines. Most of those are available for both commercial
large scale and residential washing machines with the exception that are only available for, single family homeowners. So what that background should help you, understand is that DWA is not coming at this regulation from a point of defensiveness or not wanting to save water or not looking towards saving water. It's very much a part of the fabric of who we are and what we do. So in terms of the way that the regulation has evolved, we've been at the table since the very beginning. I mean, since the legislation was being written, we were working with the legislators on different provisions that they might put into the law. And, have continued to work as the Department of Water Resources, which was the first entity from the state that kind of got their hands into really working out how these objectives would come together. There were work groups that were formed. I personally participated in those. And then the state actually did some flyovers where they looked at the landscape here in our community and provided that data to the water agencies. And we were actually part of a special pilot test group that we got flown twice because I pinged people about being in the pilot study group because I thought it would be good for us. And turns out it was. Now we have newer data than some of the other people. But DWR, the Department of Water Resources, gave their recommendations on what these regulations should look like to the State Water Board. And it is a different organization. It's kind of the rule-making body as it pertains to water in the state of California. So the state of California is now in this formal rule-making process. And they have this draft regulation, which is what we're here talking about today. And water agencies are preparing feedback. So we're doing that. Those, as President Ortega stated, our neighbor agencies are doing that. Everywhere throughout the state, folks are doing that. I probably spent 40 hours in the past week on calls related to this topic because it's a really important period of time, because this is when really any last efforts at making changes or alternative pathways or what have you that would allow us to comply could happen. So this is the State Water Board's graphic for what the regulation looks like. You get a standard, which is denoted by the yellow ribbon, and it's made up of 4 different components, which I'll go into. And then you have 2 different elements. The bonus incentive doesn't really apply. It has to do with direct potable reuse. It doesn't apply in our community. And then variances, which do apply in our community, and I'll get into. So starting with those variances, they have a couple established variances that we may look into. Seasonal population, obviously very big deal here. Evaporative coolers, most people have air conditioning units in our community, but there is some evaporative cooler use that could contribute. Horse trails, for those of you that live in the Los Padres neighborhood, maybe there's some stuff over there, but not extensive in our community. The trouble is, the way the draft regulation is currently written, any one of those objectives would have to have a 5% material impact on your objective in order to apply. So given the fact that we in this area, generally speaking, in the residential realm, about 70% of the water use is outdoors. For us to have the hope that even a big flux of seasonal population would make up 5% of that budget is uncertain. And it's complicated to determine. So that's one area we may be looking to make some comments. So now we're getting into the meat of what the objective is. So residential indoor use, it's starting out, this goes into effect at 55 gallons per person per day, then going down to 47 gallons per person per day, and then to 42 gallons per person per day. And I just put some other stats on there to give you a little bit of frame of reference for how many gallons you might use in a given day. 10-minute showers, 25 gallons. So by 2030, that's more than half of your daily allowance is that one shower. So just kind of thinking through how aggressive some of these things may be, but of course technology will change over time and hopefully things will get a little bit more efficient too in terms of appliances. So with water loss, we have a very good news story there. The water loss component of this regulation was kind of in parallel with another bill that required the water loss stuff to be tidied up a little sooner. And they allowed us to submit our own data when we didn't like the data that they had in there by default. So there were some areas where it's like, how many leaks do you have per 1,000 feet of pipe? You know, how long does it take your crew to repair a leak? Things like that, that they had default values in their tool for us, but that they allowed us to submit our own data if we had it. And when we put in our own data, it helped immeasurably. We went from having to reduce 50 gallons per connection or per, water meter per day to having no reduction required. So really impactful. And this really just goes to show you how important it is to have good local data. So that part of the budget, we're not really concerned about because of the fact that we're not looking at a reduction necessarily, but we do have to maintain the water loss levels. And as you can imagine, as pipes get older over time, they degrade, and we could conceivably lose more as the system ages. So we will still have to be a little bit more aggressive about maintaining the system. So residential outdoor use, this is a big bucket for us. You'll see a lot of numbers here, and what I would love for you to take away is that, in the desert, we're looking at plant factors at the bottom. Desert plants about 0.3 plant factor, rye, grass, 0.6, Bermuda 0.8. And then you would divide that by irrigation efficiency. So no sprinkler system is perfect and delivers water in perfect uniformity and doesn't ever, blow away or hit the sidewalk or what have you. So basically the state has this big matrix of taking the plant factor and taking the irrigation efficiency and coming up with what they call a landscape irrigation or efficiency factor, LEF. And they have developed these numbers of 0.8, 0.55, and they're pretty aggressive. And I think one thing that we're struggling with is that it could get to a point where grass is just not in the budget. We just cannot budget grass in this area. And it's not necessarily just this area, but I think especially in this area, given the climate. So grass has been part of the community here for as long, potentially almost as long as it existed. And there are a lot of historic sites that have grass. There are a lot of areas throughout the community like parks and such that rely on grass. And there are a few good news notes that, like, if anywhere is recycled with recycled water, it gets a little bit more of an allowance. And then one thing to note is when they did the flyover, if your yard happened to be brown because you were letting it dry out for water conservation reasons or what have you, it might not have been counted as an irrigated area, and the state water board is basically saying, so anything that wasn't being actively watered, then we're not going to give credit to. And that's a little bit of out of step with what the legislation kind of provided. So we may be pushing back there because just, maybe someone was in foreclosure or what have you, and now there's someone in that same property that wasn't counted, and that's more budget that our community needs collectively. And I think it's important to know, just because the state's giving Desert Water Agency a budget, it doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to give every single customer a budget, but it very well may make more sense for the Desert Water Agency's policymakers to steer in that direction if we're being put in a position where we have to have a budget for these things. We currently don't. So water is generally now sold per unit. The unit 1 that you buy costs the same as the unit 100 that you buy. It's a little bit different pricing mechanism. Every water agency you go to is going to have something a little bit different. So the last bit of the draft regulation is this commercial bucket. So this is just for commercial landscapes with dedicated irrigation meters, which means there's a meter solely for irrigation purposes. And the way that they budget this is to look at your use and give you that amount of water in the interim. Now that may sound good, but the areas that they have mapped as likely dedicated irrigation meters may not match what your system is actually serving with dedicated irrigation meters. So we have some concerns there. And then over time, again, that factor goes down really low to the point where we may not be looking at a future where grass is budgeted in these commercial, institutional and industrial spaces, which would include parks. So I wanted to just take us back to this whole picture again. So the reminder that under the ribbon are the four core components of what make up our budget. And then variance would give us a little tab on extra budget. And then again, that bonus and incentive won't apply here, and then that's our objective. So this does not include commercial indoor water use, so things like cannabis grows would not be covered this time. It does require, however, really onerous best management practices and water agency reporting for commercial groups. So we may be reaching out to those cannabis growers and saying, hey, within your industry, you're one of the top 10 users, and here are some of the things that we would need you to do to step back on that use. So some thoughts for desert water when kind of approaching this regulation is, pools are a very big deal in this community. Coachella Valley has more pools per capita than anywhere in the United States. And the provision in the regulation for pools is temporary. I don't know where the pools are going, but I imagine the pools will stick around and the budget for them might evaporate, at least according to the draft regulation. So I think that that's one area we'll probably have some success in making comments, is that, if pools are a pretty big part of the economy and lifestyle here in Palm Springs, that in fact we're quite known for that. So perhaps you could make this temporary provision for pools permanent. Short-term vacation rentals. So they don't count the homes as units necessarily. It's a population-based exercise. So if someone is not a census counted Palm Springs resident, we don't get water use for them. So when people have a short-term vacation rental home that is occupied 9 months of the year, with an average of 4 people, that's a lot of use that's not getting counted. So I think that's something we need to lean into, because it's, based on the data that we've seen, it's like 10% or more of the homes that Desert Water Agency serves. And then the indoor use with the outdoor variances, or the outdoor use compared to these indoor variances, as I stated earlier, it's going to be really hard to meet that threshold just because so much of our water is used outdoors, that for us to try and make a 5% impact with any one of those variances and thus be eligible for it, it's a really high bar. So we are trying to say, hey, what if all of them together make 5%? Or what if we're out of compliance? Can't you consider any of these variances? They're all important in this community. So we just wanted to give you some background on what we're going to be talking about. And the reason we want to give you that background is because this will have a really big impact on Palm Springs. So this, as it is written, it looks like we would be facing a 20 to 35% reduction requirement. So that's like removing Sunrise Park with the baseball field 30 times over, or 22,000 average size front yards. So I don't know how we're going to accomplish that, because we only serve 23,000 customers, and I can tell you that not all of them have grass in their front yard. So it's really feasibility is the primary concern here. And then, of course, water rates, the structure and cost could change in the future, as I alluded to earlier. And then we do have other priorities and projects. We have to replace pipelines, some of which dates back to the 1930s. And we do have other facilities we have to think about. We have investments for future water supplies. And if we're focusing too much of our time and budget and staffing resources on conservation, it inherently kind of limits those other things, or drives rates even further. And again, the economic impact, think about landscapers, pool industry professionals, tourism, HOAs, the people that live here are going to be hit in their wallet, or with their livelihood. So just refresh, feasibility is a concern, affordability, flexibility on how water agencies respond to this, and then kind of what the legislation originally intended. So that's where we're gonna be providing comments both on October 4th and in a comment letter on October 17th. And we are working on a regional template letter that we're gonna provide the city and different industry trade groups, CVAG, DPPA, et cetera. So that our community's voice can be heard. We do feel like it's important at this juncture for folks to have the opportunity to input. Even as individual residents, you're welcome to attend these hearings and provide your feedback. And throw up a QR code and a link to the page on our website that's dedicated to these issues, but really welcome or welcome questions and very much appreciate your time and attention today.
Yeah, no question. So with the rest of this, with a lot of the water that we're getting, you mentioned that we've got the groundwater. Are we getting any of ours from the Colorado River? Because there's some of the water reports we read, California's in the low basin. So do we get anything, or are we mainly just groundwater and river?
It's a yes and a no. So we have water rights to the Sierra Nevada. And that's our exclusive claim, if you will, to imported water. However, we don't have a physical connection to the State Water Project. So we use an exchange agreement with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And they deliver us water from the Colorado River because the aqueduct goes right through this community. And so instead of getting our State Water Project amount, we get whatever we would have gotten through the State Water Project, we get in Colorado River water. And it's even more complicated than that because it's not necessarily accounted for on a year-to-year basis. They may deliver a huge slug of water in a year where the Colorado is doing really well. And then in a year where it's not, they may under-deliver. So we have like a vast accounting spreadsheet to make sure that we're getting all the deliveries that we should. But we are impacted by the Colorado River in that way. And then the Coachella Valley as a whole is impacted by the Colorado River because our neighbors, Coachella Valley Water District, does receive water that they have rights to from the Colorado River.
With all the issues with Colorado River drying up, what are you guys thinking of in the future? How's that impacting that? Because I mean, just the reports on where the Colorado River is going to be in 5 to 10 years is in time with a lot of the things you put up there. So how is that going into your plans, or is that just something different?
So it's a bit different. Our long-term water management planning process, if you're interested in diving in there, the best place to look would be the Indio and Mission Creek Sub-Basin Alternative Plan Updates. And I know that sounds like the worst name for document ever, and in fact it might be. But both of those groundwater sub-basins are what feed the Coachella Valley, and primarily the Indio Sub-Basin and the Mission Creek Sub-Basins in the Desert Hot Springs area. But if you were to look at the Indio Sub-Basin Water Management Plan, the last 5-year update for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, it has a detailing of the different supplies we have and what we rely on, and the different assumptions about climate change and the different assumptions about availability and what new sources we're looking at. And, we're looking through 2070. So we are very much trying to keep a pulse on these things. But what I will say is that the Colorado supply has been much, much more reliable than what we see on the state side. It's the state side where we're not getting full deliveries. The Colorado has been extremely reliable in delivering all of the water that California is entitled to.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna sign that comment letter pretty soon because we need water. But I wanted to ask, does the Desert Water Agency have anyone that's solely looking at more sustainable ways or things we can adopt in the valley? Because looking into the future, we might win this and get what we need as the water budget. But maybe 100 years from now, we can't have that much of water.
Yes.
So is there anyone on your board that solely looking at what are the alternative ways we can conserve water along with this new flush toilets or grass conversions, what are little things we can do in the future?
Yes, we have several people on the team that I'm privileged to work with. We have a water resources specialist, we have a conservation manager, conservation specialist. So there's lots of people on the team, a conservation coordinator that work on all the different programs that we have and tips and information. And it's also about the outreach, right? Because we're asking people to do something, so we have to do that effectively. So we also have people who are dedicated to getting the word out about those programs.
And I'd like to add to that. We also have a board that's extremely dedicated to conservation. We have put millions and millions of dollars over the last almost 10 years into, for example, the turf rebate programs, turf buyback program. We find that that's a very cost-effective way to keep water in the aquifer and keep it in the ground, keep every year after year. Once that water is not being drawn to water a lawn, it's staying in the ground, and we're able to use it for other things. So again, having been on the board for 2.5 years, but having observed the board prior to that, I can tell you that is a primary concern and goal of the board as up till now. So we put a lot of effort, a lot of money into that.
I would like to also say and thank the board for every time we've come back because the fund has run out. We spent all of our grass removal money. They always give us more. So, they've been very dedicated and supportive of these programs.
I would like to request or go back to your board and discuss, like, if you can get some funding in the future in a year or 2 years where we can pick like certain number of houses, like 5 houses in the city of Palm Springs, and do some retrofittings in the water usage. For example, I studied a little bit of permaculture and I'm studying more on water conservation because growing up, my grandparents have to walk 5 miles one way to get water, and we have to rely on like less than 50 gallons of water for a household of 5 with animals and everything. So my major question is like, what happens if we promote people to install laundry to lawn or laundry to garden gray water system, rain gutter system, even though it doesn't rain for us, but when it rains, it pours. We have this surge of rains, and I've been here only 3 years. And I'm like, where is the water going? It's not going into my aquifer, but I know it's going somewhere else. And converting some of the pools, if the resident is interested, converting their salt or chlorine pool into a natural pool system where they don't have to empty it at all. Those are the things we can think about and say, hey, test them out, not just give them the information. If Desert Water Agency is willing to get some budgeting on that or any kind of funds, to pick 4 or 5 houses for a whole year and clearly make some retrofits in the houses, gray water system. Pool conversion is a big thing, but high-tech water leakage sensors that can be installed into the different parts of the house, whether it's a new construction or a retrofit. And what the other thing, I saw this fancy thing where there is a tap on the toilet seat where you're washing your hands and the water is going into the toilet tank rather than. So if we can do a study with 5 or 10 homes that are interested in making these small changes, and if we have that information, maybe for the next 100 years, we can say, hey, these are the things we can promote in the valley, and we can reduce our budget by this percentage. Thank you.
Could I ask you to talk a little bit about the regional study?
Sure, we're working on a study right now to better understand the impact of the conservation programs, and it primarily focuses on the grass removal program because to date, we've assumed that's our largest water saving program. And I think we're in a phase in our evolution with conservation that we don't want these things on assumption anymore, because it's getting to the point where, we're looking at new water supplies. And conservation in a way is a new water supply. The water that you get people to save can be used in other households where maybe it's more necessary. So I think that the study really aims at better understanding the effectiveness of that specific program, and then also comparing it to established data on other programs, because, for example, savings from, a sink back toilet, you know, there's studies that have been done on that. We don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel here in the Coachella Valley. But where there are nuances, like in our outdoor environment, that you can't really replicate somewhere else, it does really matter that we study that. So we are in the midst of that, and also trying to learn more about how that program relates to all of the other efficiencies that are established.
Just a brief comment, you mentioned early on, low use of evaporated coolers in Palm Springs. Actually, in the mobile home parks, there's a fairly high level of use of evaporated coolers, and I believe in many other lower income areas, so it's not something to write off.
Absolutely, no, and that's why we're trying to approach this data about, instead of this 5% for each variance, let's roll them up all together and add them together, get to 5. You know, we really want to be able to put in for every little thing that we can, because in our community, it makes such a big difference, because we are a very water intensive community compared to other places, and it's simply because it's very, very hot. Everything needs more water, including ourselves, to live and thrive here.
Well, as an English person who can die in a sea, I quite appreciate any water we can get, so yeah, definitely will. Any other questions for Deidre?
One more.
Yes.
I want to talk about vacation rentals. It kind of like was there, but then not there at the same time. Vacation rentals, and part of what DWA does really well is proper education. And I know that, we all see it, but vacation rentals sometimes are people that come from outside the cities. And basically finding a way to actually communicate with those people that are coming into our city. And I think we've had this conversation about the Palm Springs Airport, what they're doing and remodeling and DWA being involved in that process also to educate those people coming into our cities. We also need to go to our property managers and also the Airbnbs, of course, and the HOAs and things like that, have discussions with them about their property, how they're renting them, and making sure they're educating their people in reference to sustainability, because the water that's being used, people come into the city, they're here to have fun. We know that. They use the pools, they use the water, and that's what it's about. But I think that there's a lot of water usage, like in a community that I specifically live in, we have Airbnb and a vacation rentals, and we see the water bill every month and we go, wow. As I'm using it going, mine's down here, I know that, but then it's our communities. So it's the education process. And I know that you guys probably spend a lot of money on, but with Airbnbs and stuff like that, I think that's what we need to focus on also.
So we've had some opportunities come up. Well, one has been around for a while as a potential area where we might be able to provide sort of an educational point where it'll be like a physical place where people, both residents and visitors, could go and learn more about water here in the desert. I can't really talk any details about that, but there are a couple of things that we're looking at where it could almost be like an attraction. And that might be an opportunity that might be kind of in line with what you're, at least in part, talking about. People could find out, what is the aquifer? How many times did people ask me, like, so where does our water come from, right? And go through the whole story about the aquifer and how the aquifer gets replenished and so on, and how we manage the aquifer. But even just knowing what an aquifer is and how it came to be here in the desert, and then how that water is now being used today. So those are some things that we're talking about.
I'd also like to note that we have an existing program where we have signage in the hotels that will allow us to have signage. Some of them are corporate and will not, others are corporate and will cooperate, and then others absolutely have signage. And we also have worked with one of the largest vacation rental management companies in Palm Springs, Acme Homes. And we have a page in their past annual about water conservation. So to the extent that we can cooperate with these entities, we absolutely want to share the information in whatever way will be effective. But you're right, I mean, at the end of the day, they do have to wash their sheets and towels when guests leave and come. So there's going to be a footprint, but to the extent that we can minimize it, we're certainly willing to look at creative ways to do more. So I think we have ideas. Well, yeah.
I know that DWA on your website has a place where people can report water waste. And that was a big contributor to that for a long time, as you know, Ashley. How successful is that in terms of actually catching the people or solving the problems where waste has been reported? And I did want to comment on last Saturday, I was driving south on Avenida Caballeros, and it was like a river running down the center of the street. It was Saturday, so I didn't know if reporting would do any good, but there was a lot of water running down the street. But that happens a lot.
It does, and sometimes it's pool drains, and other times it's leaks from our pipelines, and then sometimes it's, you know, broken sprinklers or irrigation practices. But I think when we reach out to homeowners and tell them that something on their property is broken and it's costing them money and they may get a ticket, you know, we've had a pretty good success rate with that. I will say there have been instances where it's been difficult and we've had to notify groups over and over again. Usually it's when it's like a business with an out-of-town owner or an HOA where there's no one person responsible for paying the bill. Those are the situations that are a little bit more challenging, but by and large, I think people want to do the right thing and make sure that their property is in good condition.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, I would tell you not to hesitate to report anything, regardless of whether it's Saturday or, you know, Sunday evening or whatever time of day, because I do it. And so you just, because you don't really know, unless you're gonna take a lot of time to do detective work and trace it back and figure out what the source might be, you don't know. It could be a leak, you know, it could be a pipeline leak, it could be something major as opposed to just run off from somebody's front lawn. So I take the position that you should just, if you have the time to do it and the inclination to do it, and it's very easy, you can call in. There's an off hours recording place where you can leave recording if that's more convenient, and you can also go to our website and record it that way.
DWA.org/report.
I do have a question, actually. I know DWA is pushing back on the state's mandates, 20 to 35% being what they might require. What is the percentage that needs to be reduced to keep the aquifer sustainable? Like how much is going in versus how much is coming out? We know there's wave pools going in and lakes going in the valley. So the state is coming up with these mandates because we are getting less water. So how much water is going to be coming from the Colorado River to recharge the aquifer to sustain us in the long term, basically?
So it's a very delicate balance of a lot of different elements, right? You have new development that requires new demand, you have technology which lowers demand, you have new water supplies coming online, you have new storage projects coming online. The DWA is investing in, you have people buying into conservation. So it's basically a very complicated equation. And I'm going to point you back to the Indio Subbasin Sustainable Groundwater Management Plan, because it really outlines how through 2070 we're looking at these things. And it's so complicated. And you know, population projections and forecasts and land use codes. And, you know, we're really trying to look holistically at where things are now and how things are going to change over time and, you know, getting less precipitation and snowfall and, you know, how that's going to impact things at the local level and the statewide level. And how the statewide level impacts the local level, because it's there's a lot of directions in those relationships. So it is something we are looking at and trying to take into consideration. And in terms of what we need to be sustainable, in terms of how much water we need to cut back, during the last drought, we established this 10 to 13% conservation target. And we never took it away. All the other water agencies, when the drought went away, they kind of went back to their status quo, and Desert Water Agency said, well, let's hold on to that target until we get a new target from the state in terms of conservation. And the 10 to 13 is like our self-imposed goal on what we, and that's compared to 2013 levels, on what we want to aim for in order to ensure long-term sustainability. But it's a really multifaceted question because there's also money involved, right? Like we can bring in more water, it's just gonna cost more money. So it's sustainability kind of at what cost. And I think you guys grapple with that a lot. So if you guys, you know, figure out what that perfect balance is between all those factors, I would love to know that.
That's
But
$1 million question.
it is, it's so complicated. But
That's the
yeah,
bottom line question.
I think the answer is we're gonna be committed to it, and to the extent that the community is willing to embrace and accept these changes, we will be here to support that. And I mean, I think President Ortega can say that with much more authority than I can, because he, you know, this is his charge.
Question. Max Data here. For the, right now we had a hurricane and, you know, in the future, we may have a lot more rain than we did before. Maybe we didn't need it before. But are you working with the planning commission or the city that would conserve this water? And do you have any, you know, future plans on the usage of this rain that we may have, hopefully in the future? I'll let you take that.
Yes, I will say that, this year was a really wild and wet one, but all of the projections for the future are kind of hotter and drier.
Okay.
So we're not really anticipating a lot more years like this. What we are anticipating is wet years like this, and then lots of dry years between another wet year like this. So rather than having kind of, you know, a little undulation like this, we're expecting kind of, you know, peaks and then kind of longer valleys and then higher peaks again. So that's what we're anticipating. And in terms of like stormwater capture, no, right now, I think, you know, we're not a stormwater agency, so we're working with Riverside County Flood and Coachella Valley Water District. Their objective in our area, because things get so flashy and the rain comes down so fast and hard, is to keep the water away from people on property so that there's not damage. But to the extent that it is collected in these retention basins that code requires in communities, that water is hopefully percolating back into the aquifer, and then of course along the Whitewater River Channel. If it doesn't end up making its way to the Salton Sea, you know, percolates.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, along what you said. You know, some of that water is racing all the way to the Salton Sea, making it lane. We all know that that's important too. But some of it is making it back into the ground below. And our storage strategy in Coachella Valley is that aquifer below. We aren't building dams. We're putting the water back in the ground because we find that's the most effective way to hold on to it. And bank it for, you know, as Ashley was mentioning earlier, we have this arrangement with Metropolitan Water District where we trade water with them. And this year, for example, because it was such a great year in California, they banked a lot of water with us. They put a lot of water into it, even way more than we would have expected to receive from them because of what the State Water Project was delivering on our behalf. And so those are the years where we take a lot of water, we put it back in the ground, because there may be other years where we don't have that opportunity, where the State Water Project is delivering 5% of our allocation. So you know, we treat that aquifer like a savings account, and we draw out of it when we need it, and we bank it when we have access. When we have excess funds or excess water, we put it back in the ground. But the way water agencies also investing in projects that aren't necessarily in our area, but are ones that we ultimately will benefit from. So, for example, I wouldn't really call it a stormwater capture project, but there's a project on the Sacramento River that we're involved in, and that was quite evident this last year with this incredible rain. what we found is that, you know, in the old days, we relied on snow melt. That's what the state invested in, they built these big dams in Northern California to capture water from snow melt. But the climate has changed and the rain, the precipitation is happening down way below the mountains. It's not turning into snow, it's turning into water. And so we had this, you know, incredible rainstorms that came through California this last year. And this project, this one project I'm referring to, which is known as Sites off the Sacramento River, is intended to take all that excess water and just hold on to it until we need it. And we as a board, went to view that project earlier this year. Or the site for that project, I should say. And what we learned is that if that project had been final, it had been completed before these rains, it would be half full, just based on the rainfall that we had this past winter. So those are, even though they might not be projects that are here in the Coachella Valley, we're still investing in them because we're going to benefit from them later on.
Excellent, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Excellent, well, thank you both very much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
very much.
So that's the Desert Water Agency. The next part is old business, with a review of draft reach codes for energy efficiency in the controlled environment, agricultural facilities and renewable energy requirements for large commercial buildings. Which I believe is you.
All right, great, does anybody need like a 60-second break or, I think I told everyone with the rest, yeah, we'll pass the waters around. Anyone in the public comment area would like some water, also please water. Just a quick number. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit here. Yeah. And we're also going to talk about some regulations, but these are some that are a little less new. I just wanted to reiterate my thanks to the Desert Water team. We may, I think as Ashley mentioned, the city is going to be probably asked to submit a comment letter to the regulations. I will be excitedly tuning in on the Zoom of the October 4th public hearing. Because I love rules. And so if there's an interest from the commission in adding to any comment, in preparing anything as a group, or if there's a request that comes from the council, I'll make sure to channel that. But if anyone in particular has any thoughts they'd like to make sure we add into the mix, feel free to email those to me, Christian. And we can compile those, because of the Brown Act rules, I can't have you sending a group email to each other. Please don't do that to me. But you can send them to me directly. And then we can run that by people if we need to do that. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about cannabis production, which is something that I am the least knowledgeable person in this illustrious room back here. So I want to quickly talk about we heard from, you remember your first name? Stacy. Stacy. We heard from Stacy in the public comment, which is very perspective to have, but I did learning on the implementation of a regulation like this. I want to introduce David Friedman, who's here in the front. David is the program manager for Desert Community Energy and was also for many years a sustainability commissioner, and is the drafting lead on these reach codes, has a lot of expertise on it. And I want to introduce in the back our team from special programs. So we have Veronica and yes, Mitch. I was like, my glasses are really dirty and I wanted to make sure I was like, so Veronica and Mitch, who work really closely with our cultivating industry here, and have been really involved in the development of this reach code as well. So I want to talk about a couple of things today. So you'll notice that you don't have a line-by-line text to review today. That is intentional. That is because we have, I'm guessing 9, maybe 10. Roy, I think you were part of some of these conversations, but I know, so we have 9 people who are seeing this for the first time. This is something that's been kind of percolating for about a year and a half. So mostly wanted to give everyone an opportunity to just understand the who, what, where, when, and why of this. So we can talk a little bit about intent. We can talk a little bit about mechanics, sort of how we see these things coming together. But really give you all an opportunity to ask us questions and really to ask questions of the experts who are here in the room about any of those kind of more like principles-based questions, as opposed to necessarily doing a line-by-line review. There's a lot that we're still working on trying to learn. I would say we have a mature draft, the concept is fairly mature, but there's still room for us to figure out how to actually do this in implementation, so just wanted to also set that groundwork. I will run through a few things and maybe take questions at the end, because I think it'll make sense when you see all the pieces together, but if anybody's got or anyone in the middle, feel free to cut me off. Okay, so why are we even talking about this? Let me make sure I'm on the right first slide. No, I'm not. I thought that was wrong. So question number one, what is a reach code? So can anybody raise their hand if they've heard of a reach code before? Okay, cool. So if you go back, the rest of you now can add yourselves to that list. When we're talking about which code the reach code is reaching beyond, it is the building and energy code. So we adopt here at the local level, the building and energy codes that are set at the state level. The state goes through a many-year, basically continuous process. Like the second they're done with one energy code, they start working on the next code cycle. It works in a couple of years, 2 years, David?
3 years.
3 years, I believe, yeah. A 3-year cycle, so every 3 years there is a new building and energy code that's adopted at the local level. The two go hand in hand. I know here in California and many other states as well, but it regulates basically like, you know, fire egress and how tall buildings can be and how thick walls have to be and what level of insulation you need to meet our energy targets and things like that. California's energy codes are pretty progressive. So we have pretty efficient new buildings and substantial retrofit that are required, and so just want to also underline new and substantial change that will be an important trigger later on that are already required in the code. But if a municipality in the state of California or a collection of municipalities wishes to go above and beyond what is required by that code, you can do what's called a reach code. And so here I literally just excerpted from the NRDC because I thought they did a pretty good job. So, you know, we have the authority as municipalities to try to decide within some parameters. So we need to make sure that whatever we're reaching for is implementable. So, you know, we could theoretically say that everyone has to have a nuclear power plant in every home. That wouldn't make any sense. It would not get approved because it doesn't make any sense. And so there are really the kind of major metric that we're looking for here is a cost effectiveness metric. And we'll talk about this more later on. The way that the California Energy Commission defines cost effectiveness is the ability of a measure to pay for itself over time with the savings that you generate. So think, for example, about, you know, the more efficient light bulb, it's going to cost you more upfront, but theoretically in 5, 10, whatever that metric number of years, you will have earned enough back in savings that you will have paid for it. This is sort of like mental math accounting thing. This does come into play a lot when we talk about the cannabis growing industry. So we'll talk about that in a minute because that upfront capital is really that major hurdle here. It's like, even if it's gonna save you money in 30 years, it sure as hell is not saving me money now. So that's kind of the main threshold that we're looking at here. And what each of the reach codes, each reach code, in order to be approved, is required to meet those thresholds. So anything that we would propose in a reach code has to be demonstrated to be commercially available. You have to be able to buy it. It can't be a lab scale product. It's got to be something you can actually get. And without having to wait, like, you know, 2 years on a waiting list or something. And you have to be able to hit those cost effectiveness thresholds. So that's kind of what reach code is and why we want to do them. No other cities in the state have reach codes that specifically apply to what's referred to as controlled environment horticulture, which I will probably refer to using the shorthand of what we have most of here is cannabis growing. It's an indoor and greenhouse growing for indoor agriculture. Why are we even talking about this? So this is a request that came to our commission via the planning commission. So the planning commission receives, they know a lot about the kind of development that's happening here in the city because they are involved in approving most of the new developments that happen here in some way, shape, or form. Especially anything large and commercial, et cetera, they review to make sure it's in compliance with our codes, with our zoning code, et cetera. And so they're seeing a lot of trends often of kind of what's coming. So starting in July 2021, when we started to see some of the larger cannabis facilities applying for those permits for the first time, the planning commission basically flagged and said, these are going to be extremely energy intensive operations. We need to figure out what's the way that we can have this industry grow and support it while being true to our climate goals, while also, you know, being mindful of just like the energy and air pollution and things like that, the draw that's going to come from these facilities. So so this was sent over to us. David took the lead on drafting a lot of these things in collaboration with commission, getting us to, you know, a theoretically legal law. And The previous version of the Sustainability Commission has reviewed that draft. And there was one joint study session back in 2021 to kind of talk about what this could look like. We'll talk about next steps in a minute in terms of like why I'm asking you about this now. So that's why when I say we're kind of like a mature concept, like viable draft state, that's kind of what I mean by that. And what would the ordinance actually do? So there are two parts to this ordinance that you heard Stacey mention earlier. So actually only about half of the ordinance is the REACH code. So the REACH code is, and David clarified this for me earlier today, is so the way that the existing building and energy code works is that the efficiency of the license itself is actually what is regulated currently in energy code. Which I agree that maybe is not the ideal way to do this. There's a lot of different ways you can draft an energy law. But in the existing building code, it does regulate, like, if you've done like an installation project or a window project or anything, you'll see in the code, it literally gives you like a decimal point of like the level of window glazing you have to get. It's like super specific on the material side. And so that is how it's currently regulated. What we've done in this draft is change that number from one number to another number to get that like target 20% savings in the lighting, because that's the major energy production or the energy use factor that is currently regulated in the existing code. Super happy to get into the sort of like the kind of the theory behind that and why, or whether we want to look at something else, but that's kind of why that is what that is. And so the that number is now aligned to what is currently expected to be in the 2025 code. So we would be kind of like jumping ahead of it by about 2 years or so, which is interesting for us to think about because we are seeing a big growth in this industry now. So we're having a lot of facilities coming online, and because the building code applies to new or substantially renovated construction, if we want to look at something that's going to have impact, the timing makes sense for us to look at it during a period in which we might be having quite a lot of facilities coming online, as opposed to maybe waiting 2 years when most of the facilities are basically established at that point. So that's kind of a timing consideration. The second part of the ordinance is the renewable energy component, which Stacey alluded to when he was talking about solar, is requiring these facilities to either generate or procure 100% clean electricity. And so, to the point earlier, it would be really hard to solar your way out of a cannabis greenhouse because it's really energy intensive. And we're still, solar is still increasing in efficiency. It's not quite there yet. Batteries still coming online. So the ordinance would also allow the purchase of electricity either from Desert Community Energy, which has a 100% renewable offering, or Southern California, as it has in the past offered a 100% renewable offering. It is not always accessible to people to be able to become a customer of that, because I think they fill out that allocation, but were they to offer something in the future, that would also theoretically be an option. So those are kind of the two pieces. The lighting efficiency is the REACH code part, because that goes above and beyond what's in the existing building code by reducing the efficient or reducing those target like lighting metrics to get that target savings. And then the other part is kind of like a standard ordinance. But they're kind of bundled together because they kind of do something. And so like how would people actually do this? And so this is something very high level on the implementation considerations that we talked with Veronica and her team about, and kind of thinking about what does it actually mean. So a major concern here is the upfront cost of compliant equipment. So building an agricultural facility is an extremely capital intensive endeavor. This costs a whole lot of money. Also because of the federal status of cannabis growing, it means that certain kinds of financing are more and less available to people who are building these kind of facilities. And so, whereas you might say, like, if somebody was building a new Target and we gave them a new requirement, it's like, oh, go get another one, stack it on top, figure it out. That's not necessarily quite as easy to do in the space as it might be in others. And so really when we're thinking about this, because also, our teams will tell you that the cultivation does present a revenue source for the city. That's something that it's an industry we decided as a city, we want to help cultivate, but couldn't think of another word. But so figuring out how we do both is important to the city. So really where that leads us is thinking about what are the incentive pathways that we can use to help reduce that upfront cost, so that you're still seeing those long-term savings, but that you're not having all of a sudden to spend like 20% more to get this next generation LED, and you're like, oh god, like seriously, okay. So there's kind of two pathways that we can look at. So one, so in the sort of cannabis industry, there
are separate pathways that are allowed under the state framework for what are referred to as like equity businesses. So those are businesses or licenses that are being given to people who may have been impacted by overzealous enforcement and, the sort of like negative impacts of how we've talked or how we've handled, we sail as a society. And so there are grants available for those business pathways that could help with people who are pursuing that particular path. Also, SCE and SoCal Gas have offered utility incentives in the past. So there's one grower here in Palm Springs who has taken advantage of that. And SCE's put them on all their promotional materials, because I think they're the one grower who's taking advantage of it. But we're working on trying to pull a little bit more information. It's not super easy to get this information, which is why I'm kind of like a little trepidation about this, but figuring out whether we can get some incentives directly from the utilities to help offset some of those upfront costs, and help pay for some of that more expensive equipment. And then we talked to, I mentioned this already before, but these are the different ways that the renewable energy requirements can be met. So you either buy it from a utility, generate your own, or probably do some sort of combination of the two. And then in terms of where we are in the process, so there's a few things that we still need to do before this could even become a law. So educating with and hearing from cultivators, it's kind of like the next major step here. So doing a workshop and stakeholder meeting to make sure we understand the kind of implementation concerns, where we make sure we can get those people who can give us money in the room, and we can talk about like, okay, how much money would actually be available, and how much of a material impact would that make? Does this turn this from something that might prevent you from opening a cultivation facility in Palm Springs, or does this now make this something where like, okay, yeah, we can be on the front line of this, we can be more sustainable, we can show how this works, demonstrate this to the state, and this might be feasible. Because I think that's really kind of like the balance that would have to be struck, is like, are we keeping people from opening these businesses with these regulations, and how can we reduce that hurdle? Reviewing with the commission, so this is step one in that. We would need to do another like joint meeting with the planning commission, and that would be where we would dig into like the text itself and make sure all the commissions are agreed that like, yes, this is what we meant, this is what we wanted to do, we agree that we want to do this. That would be a precondition for that getting recommended back to the city council, and in which case then it would go through the council's process of doing at least 2 readings of the legislation, opportunity for public comment, opportunity for the council members and commissioners to weigh in that forum. If the council decided to pass it in whatever its final form is, it would have to go back to the Energy Commission, at least for the REACH code part, to get reviewed so they can confirm it hits those cost effectiveness targets and their other requirements for REACH codes. And then, the work would be in supporting the cultivators who want to be really hands-on in making sure people can get access to those incentives, working through kind of the sort of final form of the legislation to help them meet those targets. And that is all I have on information, and I'm happy to answer questions. I also want to make sure we can thoughtfully having our experts in the room while making sure we follow our Brown Act rules. So I will do my best to keep an eye on those while also allowing us to take advantage of all the assembled expertise here. So
We have an expert in the room back there that I would love to actually hear from.
Sure.
In reference to if she would want to come up. We've had conversations, we've had conversations months ago about you guys putting this together. One of the things is we got one feedback from one, but it would be interesting to see the feedback from other cultivators, getting them more involved with us. And you said that what's the timeline on getting and doing that with us?
Sure. So we're hoping to do that this fall, so like relatively soon. Brian, I don't know if you want to share anything about what because I know you've been talking to a lot of people kind of one-on-one. Do you want to share anything on that? Not to put you on the spot. Love it.
I would.
So we actually have a second cultivator who arrived, who was late for public comment, so I don't know if we can hear his late, and he's actually one of our equity permittees, so he would be, I think, a good person to talk to about the cost and how it's going to impact his business. Just for reference, that when we introduced the ordinance, we had a large number of applicants for cultivation. As things have changed, we've seen a significant decrease. We currently only have 5, and 2 of those are nurseries, so it doesn't have the same impact. We're not seeing any new applications at this time. So It's not the large industry that it was 2-3 years ago when this was first discussed. And I think that we do need to be mindful of any changes we make. Cultivation is the only consistent revenue stream of cannabis tax for the city. Retail is up and down. It's based on sales and they're hit or miss. And we have an oversaturation of dispensaries that is really hurting our retail sales across the board. So I do think that it's just something that you have to be mindful. I have been in discussions with LP. We're going to really work on educating and we're really going to work on soliciting feedback from our stakeholders.
I think if the chair's okay, we can maybe hear quickly from the additional cultivators, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Jürgen, and I am an equity applicant that received a equity. There are a lot of hurdles in this cannabis field right now. To have another one to overcome would be pretty hard. But one thing that I can say with building a new cultivation, one of the biggest things on my mind is to be as efficient as possible. So I am looking for all the savings in that where I can, upgrading to the best power 480 to be efficient and insulating to the best abilities and trying to run as efficient as possible. Yeah.
What's the name again? What's the business name?
Can I help?
Can't have, okay, good. Put that on my.
Question for you?
From members of the public, yeah, I just wanted to quickly see if David, if there was anything maybe you wanted to add as well as the rapper, and then I think we can maybe see if you wanted to come back up as well. Thank you. Okay. I'll see this.
Thank you, LP, and pleasure to meet most of you for the first time. I was literally at the seat for 8 years here or on Zoom, so thank you. It's good to be back. So once again, just to sort of put this all in context, this was an ask that came from Council and Planning Commission a couple of years ago, and for the very first time, the 2022 Energy Code that went into effect on January 1, 2023 does have lighting standards. So like the rest of the Energy Code, generally it applies to new construction. So you're pulling a building permit, you need to do it. There are certain cases where it's an alteration where you have to also comply with the Energy Code. So this would apply essentially to the new applicants who don't have their building permit already in effect. And as LP mentioned, this is basically would be an early adoption of the standards. So it will become, the Energy Commission has to adopt it sometime next year. But if you pull your building permit and as of January 1, 2026, the numbers that are in the draft breach code are the numbers that you would have to meet. Essentially, this simply would say that if you're a Palm Springs permittee, you go through all the permits and you're pulling your building permit, across the hall, when the ordinance becomes adopted and then approved by the Energy Commission, this would be roughly, a year and a half in advance. The numbers, we'll work out the numbers in the staff report and the presentation. The rough estimate from the consultant who did this from the Energy Commission is it's a 10-to-1 savings. So essentially these lights are exceedingly energy efficient, but the challenge, as LP has mentioned, is, well, how am I going to pay for it right away? So I'll work on getting some, with the consultant, getting some quantification, how much more is it going to cost, and then essentially, what it would be up to the city then to identify what funds would be available to assist this sort of incremental first cost. But it is I was told by the consultant that this is likely to be the single most cost-effective measure in the entire 2025 Energy Code. So one of the reasons why the commission, has been pushing for this is A, it's cost efficient, and B, there is a state law that says that buildings need to reduce their energy, their GHG intensity 40% below 2030 levels by below 1990 levels by 2030. That is a huge ask. It's a typical California state unfunded mandate, but the Energy Commission has obviously been directed by the legislature to say anything that they can do that is cost effective as required by the law to increase building energy efficiency. That's what's one of the things that's really driving this. So it's clear state policy. Palm Springs Council has generally tried to be ahead of these, policies. The city did manage to meet its 2020 GHG reduction goals. Where in my other hat, this is part of my Inland Regional Energy Network hat, and not my Desert Community Energy hat. I actually manage both programs at CVAG. This is an initiative that I started when I was literally at the table and this table, and have now taken on through my new position at CVAG for Inland Regional Energy Network.
Thank you so much. And I might figure out how we can squeeze one more chair up here so we can get Stacey up here as well. And then happy for the commissioners to send questions wherever we gotta go. Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, just wanted to kind of underline, I think when I'm thinking about this, when Veronica and I are thinking about this from the staff level, it's really a question of like, if we're gonna do this, how do we make this kind of like, as cost even as we can? So are there incentives that we can either come up with as a city that we want to offer to add on top of these other incentives that might be available? We definitely want to take other people's money first from the state and incentive programs before we use our own, but figuring out what those magnitudes might look like, so that we can kind of try to do both of these things at the same time. So I think I want to keep that both in everybody's head here. Like, we want to encourage the growth of the industry and get our state and our climate targets. So how do we do both is the key question. But I'll stop talking.
So we're trying to reduce the carbon credit or usage in the city, correct? So then water conserving is good as well,
Yeah.
which he's very knowledgeable on how to do that. There's sensors we can put in plants that'll tell us what's actually there. And we can tell a machine to turn on or off and water that plant instead of somebody just pouring excess. So a lot of those things could be implemented. General practices on how we clean our buildings or use our water. Another huge killer. We use reverse osmosis water to water our plants because it needs to be sterile. But when you do that, you're wasting half the water you use. So if I want 1,000 gallons of water, I have to use 2,000 to get the one.
That's efficient.
So if we use that for, say, cleaning our tables or irrigating the outside of the property, or something like even put it into an aquifer setting on the property where it's able to leach back down into the land, that's better use than just going down the drain and evaporating off. So I like a lot of things with just our practices could probably change a lot of things for being more efficient. But then we also use things like carbon dioxide inside of the buildings because it helps to enhance the plant's growth by 20%. Well, carbon dioxide is horrible for the environment. But if it helps us with our bottom line, because we're getting a bigger plant, they grow faster, the whole nine. But as a grower, I need to keep my envelope sealed so that I'm not leaking out the gas. The plants need to eat the gas, not seep out. So that's like he's talked about being efficient with your insulation practices, like being from the building industry my whole life. When you do a building, you put batt insulation behind your walls. Well, nowadays they require you to put plastic sheeting on to kind of keep a vapor barrier that kind of holds the air from leaking in and out. We take another step forward and go to closed cell foam, which is sprayed in on the walls. So it sprays on and gets every nook and cranny, then it expands out. And it gives you 6 inches of foam there, but also it sealed the whole envelope of the building. And 6 inches gives us like an R80 value. So we're not losing energy one way or another into our places. And so we're trying to be efficient with our lighting. Dehumidification is always big because the plants basically aspire water to grow. So that's going into the air. We have to control the environment. So we're using dehumidifiers and air conditioning to remove that water. It's very dangerous, I guess, to use that water because pathogens and stuff can develop in that reverse for that it's like ionized water once it comes off of the cooling foil. We would like to use it. We could probably use it in our landscaping. But it's something that, there are filters in the market that are available, but it really is expensive because the filters get dirty quick. And if you're not monitoring it, you could kill someone because they'll put a pathogen in a plant that then they smoke and they could die. And, you know, respiratory, all those different, I mean, we're just trying to do our best as far as making sure we have a clean environment. I mean, it's the point where we're almost like a lab or an emergency room, because that's the same mechanical equipment we use. Like, we use that grade stuff with, you know, UV filters in it and ionizers and MERV rated filters and all these different crazy things, but there are still a lot of things that we could do better just in practices that will save a lot of water. And like I said, with just using the mechanical, like even with the mechanical equipment that's existing in most of these facilities, if they just wired it correctly, it would be more efficient by 20 to 30%. But if you have a new applicant coming in and he chose the right mechanical gear, they could be about 50% savings. So you can still go in and make all these existing places step up their, or, you know, take their dirty power and make it clean. You know, so if they're more efficient than they're, you know, we're obviously have less on the grid, we've, you know, just better all in general, so. But as we said, he knows watering practices in a way though, where there should be almost no runoff coming off the table. The plants should just be able to use what's in their medium to live off of, and then we cut them out and off we go. But we can also do some things like recycling. Lots of boxes come in. We use cocoa for our growing medium, so we can take it out to the recycling plant. They put it in mulch and stuff, and so. But there are other growing mediums that aren't so recyclable and stuff like that too. So it's just kind of, I guess, going over what practices facilities use would help to really fix a lot of problems. You know,
One of the bits you mentioned earlier, which I tried to talk about before, now I'll share that. You mentioned the dirty powers, you mentioned it, like, for example, how it's wired, the usage and the efficiency, and the light standard was voltage as opposed to the amperage that comes in. Were you guys, like, did many people talk to you guys with regards to the types of efficiency savings you can make in a business and what areas it was, or was it like a general sort of ordinance that came down that covered everything, and it was you guys that are noticing this so you could be better? So
what it really came down to was people wanting to cram more stuff into a smaller space.
Right.
You know, and I'm only given so much power, so I usually help design facilities for people, and so when it comes down to it, they're like, well, we can only get 100 lights in at 120 volts. And I turn around and I go, well, it's running at 480 and I give you 300 lights.
right,
You know, and then we don't have a place to put them up, but that's kind of how it is. Everyone wants as many lights in the building as they possibly can, and they don't think about like a conference room or a bath, you know, bathrooms are, you know, required by code nowadays, but most of my people would not put a bathroom in because they want more lights.
right.
But that's just how it is, but yeah, it's just, I think being more efficient, you know, or being better with our practices, and we could hold people to a higher standard with you know, having a license here in this town, because they could require to, you know, capture the runoff and then use it for this, or have a cistern on site that percolated down or something of those natures. So I mean, a lot of different things.
I think after growing for a while, you realize with ongoing costs,
Yeah.
that efficiency is the way to save money.
Yeah.
So the longer you do it, the more you'll realize, you know, the money you put in, you will get back on the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of small businesses, and one of the killers is how much stuff you're wasting. So, like I imagine you guys are pretty hot, and especially as it's a growing business where you've got finally product for production. So, when we're looking at these ordinances, is there already like a best practices that you guys like know of within the industry, or is it just something that you guys yourself have established over years and you obviously know each other? Like,
Yeah.
do you share hints and tips? Because I know obviously practices will get a little bit.
A lot of the design is done by mechanical engineers that are not from our city, and they usually don't understand
Right.
cannabis as well. So it's kind of up to what they know from previous jobs they've done.
Right.
And we usually come in and end up having to like educate them in a way about the use of the power, and then also the air conditionings we use.
Yeah.
instead of having a air conditioning and a dehumidifier, they sell a unit that's all in one.
Right.
And it's very efficient at regulating the power through, instead of having two that are operating one, they can short cycle each other and do all these different things, but it's just equipment, use of the power, and trying to keep the sealed envelope. And a lot of the sealed envelope for us, trying to keep bugs out.
Yeah.
So, but we also don't want to lose the CO2 in the building and things like that as well, or the air conditioning, because it's expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, we try and keep our set points within 2% of what we put them at. And it's obtainable, but you've got to do things right.
Yeah.
So, and that's calculating 127 degrees outside while I'm trying to do 80 degrees inside. It's fun, but that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
It's a passion for sure.
One thing that I could add to that is we are a pretty tight knit community.
Yeah.
And we do know the people who are running efficient and doing it in our industry, making money. So essentially, that's who we want to go and try and be like, get that kind of equipment, that kind of build out per se. And we're always trying to get better. Because if it is a passion, that's what you're always going to try and do.
So I can imagine that Palm Springs has got a pretty unique set of environmental factors.
Oh, yes.
Just for living here, let alone trying to grow things here. So so can we try and find some things off of you guys for best practices going forward that can help other? Because if it's not like a closely guarded trade secret where you're going to try and murder us up finding it out.
We're just trying to do better for the world.
Exactly. It would be great because especially if it's mechanical engineers coming from outside. And if they're just doing a solution that they believe fits and you guys know for a fact it doesn't, then we can save everybody a lot of time and effort, and then new people not meeting codes that you guys already know they'll need to meet later. So I believe you had a
Question and then Don.
You go ahead, Tom.
Oh, you didn't raise your hand. I thought you raised your hand. Sorry.
No.
Okay.
I was gonna say, by passing this ordinance, are we gonna see a whole influx of cultivators coming in or like new businesses coming in?
You probably steer people away for sure. Because they could go to Adelano right now and it's cheaper to do it all out there. The city's not as overloaded with other projects going on, so they can get their plans approved and the taxes are competitive what we have here. They have more power to be supplied in Adelano right now, so Edison's getting a little sketchy with some of our facilities. They're running out of power on the grid. So you can get a will serve letter on a new building that might take 4 years to get supplied. So it's becoming kind of common practice now, but.
I don't know anything about the cannabis industry yet. I'm just started learning, but you mentioned that there are only 5 cultivators in the Palm Springs, or more,
There's probably quite a few more.
quite a few
Well,
more.
No, I take that back. There was probably 7 licenses, I think, that are out there right now for cultivation and probably 40 for storefronts.
So are you guys concentrated in one side of the Palm Springs, or are you like scattered around the city?
We kind of used to be scattered in all the different industrial, commercial areas. Our odor problems created an issue with that. So the city did the best practice and moved us on the north side of the freeway.
There is a cannabis overlay zone that was established for that reason, to move them to an area where it'd be more, less impact to the city. So north of the 10 freeway is being the cannabis overlay zone, which is great for the city, but there's less ability for resources. A lot of them have to be ground built, so this will impact them a lot.
So if not, I mean, this is me generally thinking, if not the 10 freeway is considered as the cannabis overlay, and I'm assuming it's more than 1 acre considering all the area. So it's completely possible for you guys to have wind energy on your own for the area. I mean, it's expensive, but
I would want to run a wire across to one of those windows. You don't even know.
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about that. Why come nobody's talking about geothermal energy?
I know a lot of our windmills are owned by some local, families and the properties anyway. I don't know about the actual windmills. But I think there's something that could be done. I mean, there's out in that area, you guys also have a brownout plant runs on natural gas. So I mean, I know that's not very efficient for, you
No,
know, CO2 production, but you know, it's. There is an infrastructure out there that is, at least it's a little better there than it is in other parts of the city. The other parts of the city are older where it's not, Edison doesn't have the power and stuff. Out where we're at right now, we have septic systems and no sewer. So they're trying to get a sewer system in out there, but Mission Valley Waters, they said it was supposed to happen this year. And
So are those the reasons why nobody talked to you about establishing a geothermal energy system while you're building the facility itself? Or have you guys considered that source of energy along with solar?
no one has ever come at us with something like that. Usually it's kind of like natural gas generators or stuff of that nature, you know, diesel generation, but other than that, we don't have usually the footprint to put up a windmill or like I said, once again, the solar, we couldn't have enough size to make a difference really for the amount of solar that we would need.
But LP, if I could answer that question, wearing my desert community energy hat, because I said I wear two separate hats. These ordinances are the initiative of the new Inland Regional Energy Network.
It's not. But the other thing that is too is, you know, geothermal, that requires a well and that gets into some permitting and then whatever generation system we choose has to be UL rated and be able to be acceptable for the planning department to be used. You know, so it'd be interesting. I'm definitely on board with that.
Yeah, because I would love to see that for calculator. I mean, whoever is building a new house, I'm like, put the geothermal system and do the solar on top. But I will stop with this question. If your cultivators are worried about the upfront cost that you guys need to do for this switch, are you looking for any kind of crop insurance? So once you make the switch, like if your crop is insured just like soybeans and corn is, everything is insured by the federal government, are you open to follow the ordinances or test them out if your crop is insured for a certain period of time?
The whole federal thing, they won't allow us to do anything federally. We're not protected by them in any way and we can't get grants federally. But I mean, on a state level, I mean, it's just I'm not sure.
Is that one of the reasons why you're kind of thinking about putting up this upfront cost? Because if you make the changes, are you thinking, hey, I might not have the crop I needed?
No, the crop, it's so if you're choosing different light manufacturers and you don't know that it's going to produce something for you, that's where it will get a little scary for us. It's equipment that we've used time over time that we can just replicate the same system. So it's, but with the 480 and the switching over that, it doesn't affect the light at all. It's in the machine itself that knows what's happening up there, and it's not affecting our lighting or our crop in any way. So it's you can literally, an electrician could rewire a panel in probably a day to make it more efficient. So, you know, you would shut down the facility, they'd be under the dark for a little while for that 12-hour period or 8 hours, and he could wire the whole system back on to being 480 volt instead of 110, 220. And there goes half the amps.
I just want to make sure I'm keeping track of our question queue. I'm sorry, I had to run out and back. Got my exercise for today. I just want to see who has questions. So Dawn, I have you in the queue. Bernard, you're in the queue. Anybody else?
I'm done, so.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure. Okay.
I'm wondering if we can move this on to another meeting or to another venue because we're getting late. And it's not clear to me what we're talking about anymore. So
Sure.
So I'm not happy with where we are at the moment. I'd like to see this somehow set aside and move downward.
Sure, maybe Bernard, do you have a question on like the ordinance that we can maybe either try to hold on quickly or we can.
It was a quick question about the ordinance and whether or not, I think it's for new commercial businesses and not retroactive.
That is correct. Well, once again, it's an amendment to the energy code, so it simply says what the energy code does already say, which is these are the lighting requirements for new building, pulling the building permit after the ordinance goes into effect, as well as alterations, which are substantial alterations, which is 10% or more. So if you're changing 10% or more of your light bulbs, you're an existing facility, you would have to put in the more efficient ones, but otherwise this is absolutely not retroactive. It would only apply to applicants who literally pull the building permits between sometime, let's say in the first half of next year and January 1, 2026. So literally, it's roughly a year and a half between the time this ordinance could be in effect and when the statewide will become a statewide mandate. But it would capture any new applicants pulling their building permits in that period.
And I just have one real quick follow-up. So the state regulation now, the way I understand it, will that eventually catch up to the regulation that Palm Springs is
Yes, so that this
jumping
is,
ahead on?
yeah, so we literally it would be called pre-adoption.
Yeah.
So the proposal is simply to take the proposal that the Energy Commission has already considered. There was a workshop about 6 weeks ago, and that would go into effect January 1, 2026. This would essentially pre-adopt exactly the same standard, exactly the same cost effectiveness. It would become effective, let's say, first half of 2024. So it doesn't change the standards, and the Energy Commission with the consultant has confirmed that it doesn't change the sort of technical performances of the crop. So no effect on the crop. It's simply they determined that these new light bulbs in the last couple of years have become a lot more cost effective and energy efficient. So you just get a lot less energy that's used.
Thank you.
So if I could just quickly summarize, and I really appreciate our special programs team for coming, for the cultivators for joining us this evening and sharing your expertise, for David for joining us and double booking with the airport. And I appreciate you trying to be in both places at once. So just to summarize, I want to go back to our next steps really quickly. So as you'll kind of see, we have a few more touch points with different groups where we want to kind of make sure we're getting this programmatically correct if we decide to move forward on this. So I'm not asking for a commission vote at this time. I'm not asking for anybody's, I'm not asking for a collective opinion. The next thing that Veronica and our teams are going to be doing is doing more of these conversations with the cultivators to make sure that we feel like we're having the impact that we want to have in an achievable way. So that's next step. I'm happy to share that information with everybody once that gets scheduled. If you're interested in listening in, definitely we'll obviously share any summaries or readouts from that. If anybody else has any other questions or things that you think it would be important for us to answer separately, please feel free to email those to me and Christian, and we can pull those together either in like an FAQ doc or talk about it in the next meeting. And then having kind of like a commission discussion after we've got some of that information on sustainability and planning jointly. If the commission decides that we want to have another meeting where we talk about it kind of just out of the commission first, we can do that. But just giving you a sense of like what our next steps are, so we have plenty more time to dig into some of these specifics over the next couple of months. Okay. Great. Thanks everyone. Thank you all. Thanks all of the expertise in the room. We're so lucky today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Do we want to take like a 30-second stretch?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
stretch.
please.
Okay, great. Let's take a quick stretch. I am going to be stationed by the door to batch people in and out from the restroom. So let's give us 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Spell it that. And then we have one item that I swear to God is really fast, and then we have to talk about subcommittees. So I think I would estimate we need 20 more minutes.
How many more minutes?
20.
Oh.
I would say 20 is my guess, but we can speed up.
We'll make it shorter. I thought you said 40 more minutes, really?
No.
I think that's just go.
If there's only like 3 days though. It seems like that's
Looks like it's consistent plan to existing ones too.
They should be 3 applicants that
people are applying.
right now. Maybe anybody.
But it wasn't clear with too many things, so they started looking for the needs.
I just worked for.
That has nothing to do with it.
That's not where this is. I just figured it out.
Police department and planning department.
This is really just not changing.
Who saw it,
And their
Well,
complaints are about.
Same growth.
Their complaints about, that's right.
Through environmental design.
And the point
One
is,
of
they're
the
gonna have to
things
do
that
it
we
anyway
actually
by
did,
2026. The city is
My
trying to
group of
accelerate it.
5 people, we walked the cannabis road out here. And we actually, we pulled data together between, the time that actually did for Palm Springs in reference to cannabis and, all this other stuff. In reference to cannabis, we looked at the nighttime lighting and their buildings and things like that. For crime.
For the retailers, you mean?
For the retail,
Yeah.
for the retailers, not the growers out here.
Yeah.
The retailers, which I thought was extremely interesting because they do spend a lot of money on the outside of their buildings, like lighting the everything, so people can actually see them. Yeah, go and see them at night.
And they don't want crime in front of their.
Yeah,
stuff
so you
like
realize
that.
the crime dropped
Yeah.
in their areas, those are all in. They put their retailers here, but then put the growers out by the airport.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, out by the other side of the freeway, excuse me, out by the other side of the freeway. And what we found was by walking out there at night, we were like, oh, this is interesting.
And you haven't done that before. I'm out there every night.
Eh, I'm like, no, I hadn't done it. What we did was, we just assessed the buildings, how their lighting was, how their cameras were, how they were lit up, and what they were actually doing. I mean, how the businesses were, they had some cars coming and going. All
Yeah.
that. It's a little bit-
Have you ever heard, like, from the Desert Water Agency, what they think? Like, if there's more water going in than coming out right now? Like, how can you not have the answer though? I don't understand. Like, they're basing everything just saying, we don't know exactly, like, what's happening. I don't understand that.
What the water basin is like.
Yeah.
I mean, that was.
It's going like percentages.
I actually wrote that down.
I mean, she kept on referring us to the India water basin.
Yes, Indian water
But
basin.
she basically said they don't know either. I'm like, well, how do you know how much you're supposed to save if you don't even know how much water is being used and being put into aquifer?
Yeah, the question was, how can you actually budget the water when you don't know what's there?
Yeah,
Over you.
Yeah.
so that's why, like, when she's going through all this nitty gritty stuff, and going, oh, we want to push back on the 20-25% savings. But they want to do the same 13%. I'm like, well, where do you even come up with those numbers?
I think we all do.
Like, how much savings do you need to?
What that makes me. That's a good question.
Organization.
Well, I mean, do you know, like, in all your work with the Desert Water Agency, do you know if the aquifer is sustainable, like there's more water going in and coming out?
I mean, I could tell it was getting out.
But she didn't even know what the plan says. She just said basically there's so many different factors you don't even know.
They know.
So they know it's being,
They know the answer. They're just not gonna
they
say.
don't want to say it because they're pulling out more than is going in.
I wanna,
That's my suspicion.
in front of that, I would say I'm going to reading the report and I will answer your question at our next meeting, because I haven't spent that time, but did you feel confident?
I'm very curious because she was evading that question. I was like, well, how do you need to know how much water you have to know how much savings you need to have in the first place?
I
How do they?
and we can, I think we can all compare notes and have our little.
Yeah.
I wrote the same thing.
Because she was
How
not
do you do
answering,
the budget?
she would not answer that question.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you do the?
Could you get the presentation from Ashley?
Yes, I-
Send it, or send it
It's,
to
yeah,
us.
I'll send it. It's actually,
Yeah.
it's linked in the PDF, but I'll get it in the PDF and send it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanna, while we are behind time, I wanna say that we don't generally make a habit of this, but we did have 2 really key topics today, so I appreciate everybody giving me a few extra minutes this evening. I'm gonna go through this one pretty quickly. I will not talk at, I know you're director. I will not talk at full LP speed, but I will try to crank that up a little bit. So one of the things that we wanted to update everybody on is a project that's a good example of projects that can grow from the commission as well, which is the battery recycling program. And so, I keep looking at Roy, who was one of the people who was involved in developing this program. Basically, you know, as responding to a public need, which is batteries are not supposed to go in the trash. Please
promising you, but the one thing now, from this point forward, we're all gonna Scouts honor, no more batteries in the trash. But it's not obvious that that's true, like, you know, it's not written on the battery box that you're not supposed to put a battery in the trash. There weren't, you know, before we had this program, really obvious places, unless you kind of knew that you could go to Best Buy, but like you kind of can't really find the bin, and it's like. This was a problem that we were seeing a lot. And you know, this can also cause, like, you know, there's safety problems that happen with the collection, like you see trash trucks catch on fire with some of these things. You know, they're leaching, you know, metals are leaching into the groundwater. This is not good. And so this was an example of when the commission identified a need, particularly when many of you have seen my triangle chart of like the different ways that we engage in the commission. And so when we're taking sort of like a problem and we're interpreting what we're hearing from our members of the public, from people we know, we're turning those things into like ideas and things we can try. And this is a really good example of something that we can try and that we continue to do. So we collect batteries from the public at this list of locations. So City Hall, Fire Station 2, Animal Shelter, Community Center, Farmers Market. Our top collection site is the library. I think that's because their hours are the broadest and people go there with kind of a contemplative intent. And so people are often thinking, let me think about what else I need to do today. No, but the sort of more transactional places, we don't see quite as many, but we do see a lot of the farmers market. I get a decent number from the farmers market as well. But the library is where all the batteries go. We accept household batteries up to 9 volts, so we can take relatively sizable batteries. People do drop e-bike batteries off, which is not ideal because they actually don't fit in the receptacles. So we'll work on e-bike batteries, but we can also take electronics with integrated batteries. So like if you have like an old watch that, or you know, like one of those like little cheapy ones you can get online that you can't change the battery for, or a cell phone. One thing I found out, we cannot send vapes because those are considered medical waste because there's like saliva stuff. Anyways, you didn't need to know that, but please remember please remember that. And basically what we do is we collect them in these blue tubes. You may have seen the blue tubes kind of standing around different places. And then our team goes around and picks them up. We put them in these basically like these prepaid shipping buckets. So they're, you know, sturdy buckets that are rated by the Federal Department of Transportation to be safe to transport batteries. And then we box them up and we send them, I call them the battery recycling ferries, but it's a company called Battery Solutions, which has now merged with a few other battery companies where they actually properly recycle the materials. So that was important when the commission was looking to identify where these batteries would go, was making sure they're actually getting recycled as opposed to like, well, maybe we'll take the copper, we're gonna throw out the rest. No, this is actually going fully recycled. A lot of that is happening in Arizona, but some of it also happens in Tennessee. Which is where I'm from. And so in fiscal year 2022-23, which is kind of a unit of time, I think, and it's the easiest way for me to measure this is how many times I had to order buckets. Because we're not weighing them, though we could if we wanted to. Each of our buckets contains about 55 pounds of batteries. So those are my daily weightliftings. And we filled up 50 buckets in fiscal year 2023. So I'm estimating somewhere between 2,500 and 2,750 pounds of batteries that we recycled over the past fiscal year. It's not a particularly expensive program. You know, we do kind of do the rounds in terms of collecting the batteries and making sure we get them to the right place. We do have to make sure we're being very safety first when like sorting the batteries, because you know, you give people a collection tube and kind of they put a lot of stuff in there to take out a battery. But you know, the material costs for the prepaid buckets varies between $3,000 and $4,500 a year, kind of depending on how many we can buy. We do see way more batteries around Christmas time. So when people are changing out, like they're getting their old decorations out and stuff, and they're like, oh, I've got this old battery in here, they're gonna drop it off. We see them around toward the end of the season when people are packing up. We see a little bit at the beginning when people are coming back and they're realizing like, you know, the lights in their porch light are dead or whatever. But really the Christmas time bump we get a lot of batteries then. We also have the little battery boxes, which you may have seen, and actually if anybody needs any, I can pick them up and bring some over, where we distribute those often. You know, we've actually had them at certain stores, and they've handed them out as well if somebody buys a battery. We haven't got one yet. If you want to take any of those, you're welcome to do that. And we also have on occasion distributed our buckets themselves, like the prepaid ones, and we know it's like an organization will actually use it as opposed to repurposing the bucket for something else, because they do cost about $70 a bucket. So they're definitely your bucket.
I could have sworn we were on the list.
In terms of being overstepped, well, I know you guys have handed out the boxes.
Oh, yeah, we've handed out the boxes. I
Yeah.
thought we were on the list because I have containers already. Plus, we take our container down to the animal shelter so I thought we were on the list. I see we're not.
Well, you're not on the list of, on the box of city facilities that accept batteries, but that doesn't mean you're not a battery collection depot, so you and I should probably talk about this.
And there was a reason, there was a reason.
It's like, we also tape ours. We make sure the customers are taping and if they bring them in, we tape them. So, and I have a red bucket inside our paint department where they dump them all. So the employees know that's where they go also. So it's actually an education process that I've done through him to actually bring it through. So I need buckets,
Okay.
not boxes.
Yeah, all your buckets, and then also we're on the bucket. Okay, great. Awesome, got our buckets list, that's great.
And I just wanted to comment that when we developed the program, there was a reason for only having city facilities as drop-off locations. It was more easy, it was easier to manage the program at that time,
Yeah.
but obviously other places are doing it, there's more interest, and it probably does make sense to expand that.
Sure, and especially if you're willing to box up the bucket yourself and we don't have to come get it, I like that, that's great. So yes, we will talk. We're actually currently have buckets, but we're gonna get something like.
Glad I do it at 1 p.m.
Who will do who provides us the chart for that, because I told both the library and the farmers market, hey, 9-volt batteries need to be taped and it's not visible. In the little chart, and I will provide a more visible chart. Thank you. Then farmers market started putting out the tape and the signage for that. Yeah, they've been pretty good on that as well. Yeah, we ask people to take the larger batteries because at the terminals, like if you get a completed circuit, once you're in there, that's when the fire happens.
What about having a monthly collection at 1 PS? Is it a city facility also?
That's true. Happy to bring those along. I think especially as I have battery ambassadors of different locations and to help us expand the foot power of the entire sustainability office you're looking at in front of you. We are happy to do that.
I just wanted to comment that, and we went around the room, when we went around the room at the beginning, we said what neighborhoods we live in. And I'd like to just make a pitch to people to spread the word in the neighborhoods. Well, I did that at Four Seasons. I spoke at the board meeting a couple of months ago, and there was an article in our newsletter about battery recycling. And I got a lot of boxes from you. In fact, I brought 50 to the clubhouse a couple of months ago, and they're all gone. And I brought 25 more recently, but there's a lot of interest there. So I think grassroots efforts of like getting the word out and getting the boxes to people is very effective.
So that's a great example of like continue to spread the word.
Well, in the interest of moving along, anything else on the batteries?
Great, thanks everyone for the time.
Nice.
And I'm happy to help with the next item if you want. You just-
Well, next time was going to be discuss the current subcommittees and appoint commissioners to subcommittees. We're going to do that. Like reasonably speedy. I'll figure it out.
Okay, sure. Yeah, give you one, well, actually, I can probably just do this up at home. So, and I will also defer to John as well for a little bit of help here, so we're gonna talk subcommittees.
Great, I'll apologize. I'll go back to standing up.
Okay.
I hear much better in this room standing up than I do sitting.
Sure.
And there's something about the audio quality of this room that always drives me crazy. So what did you just ask?
I said, we're gonna talk about subcommittees, so I may also have you as the vice chair between our two people. So we talked, many of us, we've talked a little bit about this in our sort of like onboarding process. So short answer is, we have two subcommittees that currently exist on the commission. The standing subcommittee on waste and recycling, no, wrong, what was it, waste reduction? Thank you, yeah. I was good at that. And then we have a newly formed subcommittee on climate action, which also has a sub-focus on transportation. Subcommittees are where we dig into some of the things, so kind of like where it seemed like maybe we were going on the cannabis side, we kind of don't really, we don't have the space to do that in this container. Those are the kind of conversations that we can have more on the subcommittee level. We talked a little bit more about like, hey, how can we solve this like public engagement problem? Hear from different people because we're focused in on one topic. Also, an important thing to note is that subcommittee membership is capped for this commission at 5 people per subcommittee because they have to be below a Brown Act majority. So that doesn't mean if you pick a subcommittee today, you have to be on that subcommittee for your entire life. You can change your mind. You can, I don't know if we do alternates for subcommittees, have we ever done that? we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but if we wanted to have like a backup or something, you're also always welcome to attend as a member of the public, but if there's ever like a voting item, there can only be like a certain number of people appointed to the subcommittee. We are intending in this go around the commission to keep the number of subcommittees low, because if we have too many subcommittees, then you know, we're trying too thin, we're talking about too many things, it just doesn't, it hasn't really kind of worked in the past, so keeping it narrow seems to work, however. We can form new subcommittees if the group decides we want to. We can also form ad hoc committees if there's either a time sensitive issue or an issue maybe we want to explore and then see what we want to do about it. So say, for example, like an example I used earlier today, it's like, what if we wanted to have an Earth Day ad hoc committee? Like say we wanted to talk about Earth Day events, we don't need an Earth Day committee all year, but maybe like that's an example of an ad hoc committee. Does anyone have any questions about subcommittees, or what, let me rephrase, what questions do people have about subcommittees? It's too late in the evening, okay, that works. So. Okay, go ahead.
So we can, if we feel we need a subcommittee, like in a month or so, we can always create that subcommittee.
Absolutely, and that would be something you would bring, you know, in the commissioner comment section of this meeting, you can say, hey, I think we should have this. I would recommend maybe email that to me, like when I'm doing the agenda, but we can make sure that the member that you're also, you know, that happened. Did you have a question? Okay, okay, so I don't know exactly how we want to do this. I would say maybe we can just see like, we can go through the two subcommittees and different raise of hands of who's interested, and if we have too many, go from there.
They can fight to the death.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the waste subcommittee. So just to give people a flavor of what we've talked about historically in this one. So this is the subcommittee that's been really involved in working with our team and PSDS in implementing the new statewide waste regulations on composting, food waste direction. We talked about the battery recycling sub-program that was born from this subcommittee, etc. May I have a raise of hands of who is interested in being on the subcommittee? And I would tell people to close their eyes. Don't think about the numbers right now, just let me know if you are interested.
I'll stay on it.
Okay, got it. But Dean, was that a hand raise though?
Well, I was kind of like.
Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's not that bad. Actually, we only have 6, so that's not too bad. And then let's go through and see about climate action. So can I have a raise of hands of people who are interested in the climate action subcommittee? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Prima, I might ask to be your intro. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, she's put her hand up for both, we can solve that number pretty easily.
I was gonna say maybe you can either choose, because I know you are really involved in a lot of waste related stuff. I know that's really.
Yeah, I was just wondering which one is more related to the work I do. Probably you can tell me whether it's climate action or the waste reduction.
You know, honestly, I would say, it's a Prima has a lot of expertise in like composting, permaculture, like I know, it's like, kind of depends on how you define it, could be both. Yeah.
Like, can I be in the middle and jump wherever you have to be?
I mean, good, like, but we can only appoint 5 people to the waste subcommittee, so I would say that's kind of the.
I mean,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, I can stick with the waste reduction and then be a public for the, you know, climate action and give my comments in the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, do we have anybody else who kind of, so you said you're kind of feeling in the middle, does anybody else feel sort of in the middle on the waste trend, or is everybody else pretty much like, I'm a trash person? You're the ancient of Oscars, trash.
I guess I have to say, I'm in the middle. I was one of the ones who formed the waste reduction committee. And, you know, I'd like to volunteer my time to help bring people up to speed on some of the issues and some that we dealt with, how we dealt with them.
Sure.
And what the issues are that I saw when I was still on the committee going forward.
Mhm.
So I think it I can contribute that way.
Mhm.
However, I feel more strongly about the climate action subcommittee because I also was involved with developing the climate action roadmap and some of the objectives there. So I'll bow out of waste reduction, but or my desire for waste reduction, but I would like to make myself available if asked to help with moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, I think, of course, David is a Brown Act expert in the room, so feel free to check me if I'm saying anything that's illegal. But this is being recorded, by the way. So it sounds like we could have a realm in which we have like the 5 appointed members and we could have like an advisory member. Like if No? Okay. David doesn't like.
The Brown Act doesn't.
Just for the.
Is that-
I don't think it does.
I wear way too many hats, but one of them, particularly if the commission was being known as the Brown Act Ayatollah. And those of you who have had the one PS experience will remember that as well. So back to my old stomping ground. So the Brown Act would allow you to have 5 members, but anybody else, they basically have to sit in the room. So there's no exclusion for anybody to attend a subcommittee meeting, but they have to sit sort of quietly if they have a public comment, but they're treated as a member. The answer is they're treated as a member of the public. So you really are limited to 5 to 5 members at any one point.
Got it, thank you, Saul. Can I do a quick,
Well, yeah, could you tell me a little bit more about the climate?
Sure.
Yes.
So I think it hasn't met yet, so we don't know, but I think, and Roy, I'll start with, and maybe you can add on, because I think Roy proposed this at our last meeting, so. We do a lot of work as a commission in terms of like helping to keep the city on track with our climate goals. And so that entails like understanding what our current climate impacts are, so Christian, actually, this is kind of like a Christian activity basically. In terms of his work, but like accounting for our greenhouse gas emissions, tracking how we've been doing on our goals. Identifying new areas in which we want to investigate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why when I say sub-focus on transportation, we think it's there, even though that's not total all the work we'll be doing on that this year. And so really kind of identifying those next kind of strategic pathways for focus on climate action. Is that correct?
That's very good, and I will add a little bit. And yeah, I think it was in 2022, the city council at the time did establish priorities across the board for the city. And some was were obviously homelessness and crime reduction and so forth. But they did have some top level objectives with regard to climate action, and they related to what Christian is working on, looking at an analysis of CO2 emissions and trying to reduce CO2 emissions. Those objectives were later kind of put on the back burner by the current city council. And I think one reason why it's important that we have this subcommittee is so that we can pick up on some of those things and move them forward. Like doing the analysis, a current analysis of where we are with CO2 emissions, and also projecting what would it take to reduce by 30% from our 1990 levels, and where transportation accounts for 50% of our CO2 emissions, which is a lot. So there's a lot of challenges there. The reduction goals are for 2030. We're 3 years later from when we started talking about that. I don't think we've really done anything. So I think it's really important that we have that committee, and I have some ideas about what to do in addition to what Christian is working on, and even thinking about what the airport presented last Thursday at the council meeting and had an open house about tonight. They're expanding, they're doubling the number of terminals. They're adding a lot of parking. Now is the time to say, what's the impact going to be on our greenhouse gas emissions? And are there other ways of doing these things and still meeting the city's objectives for tourism and so forth? So I think there's a lot that we can do right away as a subcommittee to make recommendations, have dialogues with the airport. And I know you're on the committee that's dealing with that as well.
I'm on that one too.
I can switch off. with that
Then
one.
let's re-vote, actually.
Yeah.
So I will say this time, maybe keep a little bit in mind that we're trying to hit that 5 cap, but still tell me where you want to go. In the things.
Oh, it's just what you were saying, if we're moving on, then if we look at, thanks Roy for selling the climate action to people, that's great. So has anyone been sold by?
Yeah, can I see the hands for the waste again? One more time. Waste hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have room for one more now. Who won? Roy, you wanna go back in there?
For now.
Okay, does anybody else want to arm wrestle Roy for that spot?
Sold to.
Okay, great, right, awesome, all right, give me hands for climate action. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Right.
I can't be on this one, right? Or can I be on board?
I would say if we have room, you can
Yes.
be on both, but I just wanna check with the folks who have
Okay.
raised their hand for either to see if, oh, Max wants that one.
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, yeah, nice. Okay, so with those who haven't raised their hand for subcommittee, are either of you interested in that final thought?
No.
Okay, cool. So then I would say, Prima, if you wanna go for it, and then Max will reach out to Max and see if he wants to arm wrestle. So I'm sorry, can I get those hands one more time, just to make sure I can say that for the record and write down this.
For which
Those are
one?
Climate action hands. So I got Eric, Abby, Roy, Bernard, Freeman. Okay, I'm saying that so it's on the recording, so I remember. And then the waste one more time. Paige, Dean, Dawn, Roy, and Freeman. Okay, great. And I want everybody to percolate on future subcommittees if we need them. Okay, that's, I'm doing that.
Thanks. I was gonna go harass the Desert Water Agency at some point. so.
Yeah. Yes.
One thing we need to do is set a time, a standing time for the new subcommittee. I'll talk to you about it, but perhaps you can send out an email and people.
Yeah, I can do that. So we'll set a time for the climate action subcommittee to make sure that has the waste subcommittee meets on the first Thursday of every month at 2:30. If that proves to be a time that really does not work for the rest of the group, we can change it as a group if we need to. So we'll have that.
Okay, and then the standing subcommittee on waste reduction.
Okay, Dawn, you can make a short report if you like on the most recent Scotland meeting.
We talked about waste reduction. Actually, we had a fairly long discussion. I had hoped that we could move into some discussion about the impacts of climate change on waste reduction. But we didn't quite go there where I would have liked, but I do think we need to think about long periods of heat and what that does to the waste stream, and also periods of uneven rainfall.
Shenanigans, cool, okay.
So that's going to be on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Doc. Okay, and then the final part, commissioners have got 2 minutes to provide thoughts on future agenda items or any other items commission related interest. So we'll start with Paige, if you've got any, moving around to Dean,
No.
John, Mike, Eric.
Yeah, I have a question.
Excellent.
Sustainability, your offices contain you, Christian. You had another person that you're, what is actually your design position? What is exactly, you called me and one day and I was like, who? Yeah, 'cause I was like, okay, but I thought it was amazing what you were doing, but what is your extra position? What is, explain to us, help us out.
I'm climate action sustainability specialist. So I'm taking on some of the stuff that she was doing by herself essentially. So I run the community garden. That's one of the things that I manage. And then also I'm taking over the kind of climate action and transportation stuff. So right now, looking at our long-term greenhouse gases emissions and seeing how we can reduce those. But at this moment in time, from a transportation standpoint, since that is our biggest emission that we believe, yeah. So, like getting people out of cars or alternative public transportation, we can kind of, incentivize. And then also on the side, looking at our tree and shade plan as, we experience more urban heat. So that's kind of like the areas I'm focusing on at the moment.
So actually, you're putting our data together for our climate, right, our traffic, our buses, you're doing that data as you speak.
Yeah.
Kind of where you also said you were having an possible addition into your group.
Yes, so.
What would they be doing? Who has that been? I was wondering.
Yeah, totally. So we have 2 additional positions that we're working on filling. One of those is gonna be another specialist focused on waste primarily. I'll say probably 80% waste. So that's foodware ordinance, compliance with our statewide legislation on waste, helping with our environmentally preferable purchasing in the city. Probably most of that, and then I'll probably figure out some other stuff. There's a lot of stuff I do. And then the final person will be more kind of like our public engagement specialist and like front door to the office. So helping to answer questions, helping us figure out what events we want to be at, what we want to do, helping with some of our reporting and tracking and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be kind of a more like, I think of it almost as like a rotational position, like it's our most entry level, like junior position that we have.
And so, helping somebody kind of get their feet wet, whether we're making a career change into sustainability or joining, the workforce for the first time. So those are, and we may also have a fellow, but I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not gonna talk about it.
Like, the reason why I bring that up is because for years, it's only been like one person.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been a struggle for some of us in communicating and the outreach within the community.
Right.
And I realize that that's part of the reason why I'm here.
Sure, totally, and I actually, that's something that, many thanks to the members of our commission for advocating to the city council that we need to grow.
Yeah.
So we're going from, when I joined, there were 2 staff lines, we're gonna be doubling in size, and, I think that reflects the continued importance of the work to the council and the value that they put on the opinions of this community.
Awesome, welcome.
Excellent. Moving around, any comments or questions?
Oh, no.
Don? any comments?
Keep going.
Sweet. Well,
I said too much already.
Ditto.
Rima?
I always, I just started reading this book called Drop Down. I ordered this for the library. These people did a really great job on listing the top 100 things we can do to fight the climate change. They categorized this. I think some of them will really set with our city. So this book is in the library. I'm gonna drop it tomorrow, so give them a week to process this. And just take a look at it. I'm not going to read every single of them, but I'm just going through the headlines. They rank everything. Oh, we are composting. So what is the rank of that by 2020 in fighting climate change or food waste reduction? It's in the number 3 place if we can reduce food waste. We are fighting the climate change a lot. So I think this is a really good thing if we want to do a book club or discuss via emails. So I'll be dropping this book at library.
Great.
Thank you.
Excellent, thanks so much. So yeah, that's definitely worth looking into a reading. And nothing for me, so unless there's anything else, I'm gonna use the gavel, that's the only reason I can, yes.
Thank you all. I'm gonna stop for.
Took me 3 years to learn how